Sharon, you heard stories all throughout your life, and that made you curious. So, to both of those, how would you impart on everybody listening, everybody watching right now? How do you start?
Okay. Well, thank goodness we have the internet. That's the big thing. But how I initially started was talking to family and trying to figure out, like I said earlier, what's the truth versus kitchen table talk. Because throughout the years, the stories get bigger and wider, and so you don't really know. You have to take everything that people say with a grain of salt. So that's where you start, because where there's smoke, there's fire. There has to be something there. And I heard all kinds of stories. I was Native American, and we were from French Canadian, and German and Irish, and this and that and other. So how I started was on Ancestry.com. And I started building my tree. And I got a subscription, and as you're building your tree, Ancestry starts sending you documents. So we have a rule. If we cannot document it, it's kitchen table talk. It's just, maybe. It's a maybe.
Okay, I'm gonna pause her right there.
Mm-hmm.
The we that she talks about is Brandon Massey and herself. They're the Massey family historians, and Brandon has done a fantabulous job about researching and getting the appropriate documents.
So Brandon, actually I posted a message on Ancestry that I'm looking for Fascination Massey Smith, which is my great grandmother. And I kind of included a little paragraph of what I thought I knew about fascination, which was totally, it wasn't, again, it was kitchen table talk. I would say a year later, 2 years later, Brandon finds me on Facebook and says, I think that we might have a common ancestor. And so we had a long conversation, and some of the names that he was mentioning versus some of the names I was mentioning, and the fact that they were in Rhode Island, and I knew that we had family in Rhode Island, we realized that we were cousins. And we decided to team up and partner. We started a main family tree, as well as a Facebook page that we could document, and our family has gone on this journey with us as well. So that's really how we started.
Okay.
And what she's mentioning is typical of everyone, in that you start at home, you start with a story. I started with a story. I'd grown up as a kid hearing about my ancestors. And my mother was a phenomenal storyteller. She had excellent recall. She was a counselor, so she had the ability to extract information out of people when they didn't even know that they were, revealing it. And it's how, she could catch us in our stories and our lies, because she would ask us questions in a certain way when we would reveal the truth. And fortunately for me, and I think this is true of a lot of people, is that there's some ancestor or story, something about your family or something you believe about yourself. You hear, the Smiths or the Johnsons do this, or they don't do that, or they are this, or they're that. Sometimes you hear it, sometimes you pick it up just by being around your family. Sometimes you don't even have that information. But there are people that I've even met who've been adopted who had something about themselves that was just was part of who they were, and they didn't understand where it came from. Some have found their birth families, and then they found a connection. And so I was similar in that. In school, we had sessions in social studies about nature versus nurture. In church, I used to listen to the sermons about Adam and Eve, and in my mind, I wanted to try and figure out how we could connect to Adam and Eve. As a kid, you don't realize that there isn't that actual connection. But Alex Haley's Roots was published in '76, which was a big year for the nation for the bicentennial. And I lived in the suburbs of DC, which meant my family attended lots of bicentennial events. And it's really when the nation started as a whole to turn towards questioning what African American heritage was. You know, we were beginning to explore it. And because I was living in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., able to visit it with my mother to do research. He conducted research at the National Archives. So I was able to visit the National Archives with my mother and local libraries. So although we later learned that his heritage, or the heritage that he published, was part fiction, part fact, I was able to follow in his footsteps in the sense of learning how to do research, going to an archive, going to a library, going to into an archive. So for me, it laid out the path for my own progress, my own discovery. And when I was in high school, because of the bicentennial and the close proximity to DC, I was able to take advantage of the metro. We take it for granted now. When I was in high school, the Orange Line was it. I mean, it was, and so for me, it was this major thing for my parents to give me permission to come into school, to come from school to the National Archives. I used to carry this little briefcase because I thought that would make me look older. And I'd have all these papers in there, and I had this very formal approach to going to the archives because I knew that, first of all, I was privileged to be going there. You had to be 16 years old. I was on the cusp of that when I first started. They gave me a researcher's card when I was 15 and a half, and that was a big thing for me. The second thing that I knew was I was an African American coming into that facility. And I was discouraged through the whole process by most of the individuals there who said, you probably won't find your ancestors. But I had a mother who had outstanding stories.
Now, before we go on,
Yes.
because Hollis is just, I mean, she gave some great information here, and so did Sharon. We talked for an hour last week or so, and one of the juicy nuggets that she gave was, when you start your search, start where your family lived, or where that ancestor lived, okay? So she talked about Annapolis. When Sharon started her search, she started in Virginia, okay? So that's key. No sense in searching in Little Rock when your great-grandfather was on a plantation in South Carolina. It makes no sense. So that's where you want to start.
Yes. And what I want to add to that is I wanted to give you the example of the process of what I went through. You're fortunate now in that I started 30-some years ago, more than 30 years ago. And at that time, there weren't the resources that were available. We didn't have even the technology. It was back at that time, paper and pen, paper and pencil, at most with the advanced technology, might have been microfilm. Now, the example that she provided, she used social media to find an ancestor. We had to go and travel. We had to use the telephone and try and find relatives. You had to go and look through the old telephone directory to find people with the same last name. So you're fortunate now, if you're starting, or even if you've already started, you have a lot more tools and technology that's available for you to use. So what it's going to do is reduce the amount of time that you spend with your research, and also it's going to reduce the cost. We know that time equals money, and the bottom line for a lot of this process is the time that you spend and the resources that you use or consult to do your research. Now, the other part that's fortunate for everyone is that you can travel much further in terms of looking for resources and records. You can access records at a greater distance than you used to have to. You were able to do. For example, he's talking about having someone far away. With the competition and the technology that's available, genealogy is a billion-dollar business. Everyone wants access to information. This is part of our culture. Everyone's competing to provide greater access to data. And the challenge today is to be able to access that big data and to find what you're looking for and to analyze it properly.
Yes.
So I'm going to stop on that.
Yeah, in that way, because we're going to get to that as well.
Yeah.
There's an abundance of information, right? And personal experiences with Sharon and Brandon in doing research for Melvina, we came across a lot of stuff that was just not true. And we spent an inordinate time trying to prove things that were not true to begin with. But that's what you have to do, okay? Because you don't know. You'll just keep perpetuating that lie. So that's one of those things. What I wanted to talk about next was we started on this path of what to do, right? So what not to do? What are some things you don't want to do?
Well, first, what I want to say to you is the way in which we approach family stories. And we use the term lie, but the truth of the matter is that we have faulty recall. And then, there are these tests that they do. If they give you a word and they take out all the vowels and all you have are the consonants, you fill in the blank. We do that as humans. We fill in the blank. That's how we survive. This is how we thrive. So when we have stories that have blanks in them, our minds fill them in. And if we were to come in and pull out a story and take out parts of it and go around the room and have you write it down, I guarantee you everyone here will add something in there that had nothing to do with the original story. It's kind of like that.
No, we don't do that.
All of the time.
Do we do that?
Kitchen table
All
talk.
of the time. And so the other side of it is that there is generally a nugget of truth in there somewhere.
Yes.
And so the big challenge is trying to find what that nugget is and how it was analyzed and how it was recalled. There's always an element of that. Prior to coming to the Smithsonian, I worked for 12 years at a lineage society. You've heard of the Daughters of the American Revolution. They trace in order for them to join as members, they have to trace their ancestry back to someone who participated in the American Revolution. So it's roughly for someone who's about 18 years old, who's trying to join, they basically had to document about roughly 10 generations of their ancestry, sometimes a little bit less if you were an older person. And so part of my job was reviewing their ancestry, their lineage, and checking it against the records. Now I had to face these applicants who had these fantastic stories of how their ancestor won a battle or participated. They provided that key element of something that helped them win a war. I even found a story about a child who they claimed assisted in a battle at the age of 5 years old. He dodged bullets to deliver water to all of these thirsty soldiers and was going back and forth. These are the types of stories that I would hear. But I had to always look at the element in the story and figure out where the truth was and then ask them for the documentation to go back to it. And I had to do this review in the span of 2 hours to decide whether or not the lineage was correct based on the evidence that they provided or not, and ask them courteously to provide additional evidence. Now, what I learned along the way from having to examine these applications, and I would have to, at the minimum, examine 1,000 applications a year, that I saw these larger themes of how there's a story that people held on to, no matter what. And so what you have to do is hold on to your story, but as she has also recommended, you have to go and find the documentation to support it. When you don't have that documentation, you have to still look for it. You also need to step back a little bit and stop focusing on the specifics of my ancestor did this. Think in terms of my ancestor was a female. Is it likely she could have done this? How old was she? Where was she living? Or a person, a female in this area, at this era, in this place. Is it possible they could have done it?
And you're just leading right into Sharon.
Right.
Yes.
That's her.
So this is what you have to do. Sometimes we get caught up in the story. We love that ancestor, we buy into the story. You have to take a step back, be a lot more objective, and start thinking in terms of, if I were reviewing this same story and it's not connected to my family, how would I analyze it? How would I critique what's in front of me? And a lot of times, if you develop that objectivity to it, you can start to see new pathways for your research, and it helps you to come back down to reality. It helps you to also remove part of the emotional connection to your research, and that helps you to see more clearly what you have in front of you. It helps you with your analysis.
I can give you an example. We were always told that our family was from Fargo, North Dakota, and we were Chickasaw and Cherokee. No Chickasaw, no Cherokee. And my uncle insisted, well, my mom said, and I had the documentation. And the reality is that our family is originally from Loudoun County, Virginia, which we had no idea. But until we started, conducting the research. So again, you have to kind of take a step back, and if it's not documented, just put it to the side, because where there's smoke, there is some fire. So.
I had a point to make with that, but I'm not going to beat a dead horse because Hollis did excellent.
Yeah.
She nailed it. She nailed it. Okay, so before you move on for that, one of the things that you get this, the more you research and the more you check for documentation to substantiate these stories that we're trying to research, you're going to find certain things out in history that you probably didn't know anything about. For instance, there was a fire in the Census Bureau that destroyed a lot of census records. So if you go past if you're looking for something from 1890, you won't find it, right? So you gotta look 1870, which most of us African Americans search for the 1870 census, the first census after slavery, so we look for that. But if you go for 1890, you say, well, they moved. You won't find that information, so you gotta go to the next census record after that. And these are types of things you find out you don't know. Also, if there's any indications that down the line you may have been either Indian or white down the line, on certain records you may see an M for mulatto, you may see either Negro or black or colored. Okay? Don't get in your feelings about that, just keep moving, because that's how they categorized us way back when. Okay, if you weren't white, if you weren't black, you were mulatto. That could be Indians, that could be Mexicans, that could be Chinese. Okay, so know that, right? All right. So,
well, in addition, there's burn counts.
Yes, for the Civil War. So if you're looking for records in these southern states, Virginia, the Carolinas, right? So when the Union troops came through and they burned stuff to the ground, those records are gone. Those records are gone. So if you had an ancestor that had been freed, right, their manumission papers would be registered at the local courthouse, because that was the responsibility of the slave owner, was to do that. If it's a burn county, you don't have any records of that.
Well, I'll say this.
Yes.
First of all, with the approach to research, realize that there are different levels of records and documentation. So you start in your journey, for the most part, with personal documentation, your own personal records, your family's records, then you branch out. Most people will look to published sources. We look to histories in general to get a sense of where we were. Sometimes people don't look at histories, but you should look at them, local histories, to get a sense of what was going on, to understand partly, and actually as you're looking at these sources, these published histories, look at the sources that they use, because sometimes they are productions of people who are very good writers, who have a very good imagination, who tell a story that omits certain people and certain histories. So you have to be wary of the quality of the histories that you're looking at. Then you branch out to the state level and the national level and the federal level. So the census records are federal records that were taken every 10 years from 1790 up until now, and they were the information on them was collected for different reasons. Now, genealogists use them because it gives you an indication of where families were every 10 years. But people were very mobile, just as mobile back then as they are now.
Believe it or not.
Yeah.
Believe it or not.
And in terms of the record sources, most people look to the census as providing a lot of information. It gives you that 10-year window from year to year.
Snapshot.
But however, when you don't find things at the federal level, you go back down to the state level, then the county level or city level, town level, and you look at a variety of records. Now, we take for granted that there are a whole lot of records because in this information age, practically everything we do requires a document to be recorded at different levels in order to be able to drive. We provide information. We provide information about our birth, our place of origin. Genealogists take all of these different forms of evidence and we look at it in the review, the reverse of that. You try to extract different pieces of evidence and you look at it in terms of the origin, whether it was the original document or it's a derivative of that.
Okay.
And part of your analysis helps.
My next question.
Yes.
My next question for both of you. So we're doing this, right? And
well, the one thing I wanted to say before I stop was just because the document, as he mentioned, there's a fire that destroyed it, there are different levels and there are other sources that you can consult. So even if you find that either there's not a record that you expect to be there or it has been destroyed, know that there are other levels of records that you can consult to try and find evidence on your family, on your ancestors.
Can I add to that? Also, family Bible. We were able to take our family Bible and I guess my great-great-grandparents wrote all of their children's names and the year they were born. So we were able to take that information and then compare it to the census records. I got, okay, these are the people that we're looking for. And that helped us on our journey. So I guess reach out to your elders and find out who has the family Bible. If there are multiple Bibles, those are really helpful. And it's,
And also make sure they're Christian. And I'm going to say this to you. No, it
matters though.
It matters, because we make this assumption in practically every genealogy workshop I've ever sat in, or most of the books that I look at, the how-tos, the instructions. We all make this assumption that everyone's Christian. Prior to states and counties and the federal government recording records, that everyone had a Bible in which they recorded information. Well, if your family wasn't Christian, or if they weren't even literate, they wouldn't have possibly had a book to record it in. Conversely, there are people who at one point, depending on the community, when they weren't literate, they found a neighbor or someone else in the community who was literate, who recorded the information for them, or they picked another book of some sort, and you only find out if you have that family that did that. They may have found any other printed book and recorded that same kind of information in it. So don't just restrict yourself to certain categories of records. If your family has any paper documentation, you need to look through that. If there are books on the shelf that have been sitting there, encyclopedias, believe it or not. Well, most people know that a lot of people hide money in books. Mm-hmm. Well, sometimes they will record information as well. So if you have an elder and they die, or even before they die, you might want to browse through if they have books, their bookcase, to see what might be in those pages.
What might be in those pages.
Right.
Yeah. Question.
I just have a quick question. So you said, kind of when you start with documents?
Yes.
And ancestry? So, what would you recommend? I mean, do you need social security numbers of deceased people? Or what are the kind of the starting point?
What I want to preface it with is everyone's journey is going to be unique. Mm-hmm. Your starting point is going to be unique depending on your initial question, your initial curiosity. Sometimes we don't have anything, mm-hmm. and then you start. Sometimes you have a story. Sometimes you have the family historian. You know that person exists, but you don't have the information that you want. So everyone's starting point is different. Ancestry and the companies that are similar to that, they provide access to data that they've gathered from a variety of sources, from personal collections, to churches, to societies, to state governments, to institutions. They collect everything because it's a part of their business. So if you go to a site like Ancestry, there are going to be some basic things you need to know about every ancestor, every person you're researching. There's going to be a name. You're going to need some geographical information, either at birth, death, marriage, anything, where they lived. Name, place, and date, because that's common for all of us. You're going to always need those bits of data, and I always say context. Now, context is very free and open. Context in the sense of when was this individual born? When did they marry? When did they move? Where did they work? All these kinds of things is pretty fluid. Name, date, place. You're going to need to know that. When you don't know it specifically, know it generally. So, for example, you're looking for someone with a last name and you don't know their first name. You know you're looking for a man or a woman. You know, it's just these kinds of things that you're looking for, or a black person or a non-white person if the record source doesn't seem to indicate anything but whites. You might look for oddities in there of how they might reflect that they're describing an African American person. Each record is going to reveal different information, but you're always going to need to know a name. You're always going to have a date or a time frame in which you're looking, and you're also going to have a place. Now, I have been at this for a very long time, so I know how, to me it's like a mathematical equation, you know, A plus B equals C, and if you're missing one of them, you put an X in there. That's what genealogy is like. This plus this, you hope, equals that.
Okay, so she's just now entered into my next question, which is, at some point, there's going to be this gap, whether it's a huge gap or a small gap, that will require you to either make a leap of faith, okay, or rule it out as just possibly conjecture. At that time, what are your suggestions?
Well, we proceed always from the known to the unknown. And we know that history proceeds forward, okay?
Hopefully.
And our process is going in the reverse to a certain extent. And then sometimes we extrapolate into the future about things. Having a good sense of where you are in the process helps. But here's one thing that I always want you to be aware of. As you are going through the process, each step, I spend hours just looking at a photograph of an ancestor, looking at features and things like that. What does this picture say to me? There are actually specialists who do nothing but look at photographs and look at the hairstyle, look at the facial features, look at the clothing that they wear, look at the way that they are, the body posture, all of the other settings behind them, and that gives them clues to when the photo was taken. If it's a black and white, if it's digital, we know that it's, you know, of a certain time period. If you have a Bible, you look for the date of publication. Pardon me, the copyright. If you're looking at other records, ask yourself, what information does it reveal? Try and find out who created it. Try and find out why it was created and why it was used. Now, at places like Ancestry, the online sources, oftentimes will give you a little narrative, a little summary of the records that you're looking at, the scope of the records, what information they might reveal, and the original source that they derived that information from. You want to be aware of everything that you're keeping, that you're looking at, the records that have been kept, to understand why that information is in there. If you are thinking outside of the context in which it's created, for example, if the list is a list of black inhabitants of an area, and the census is special and restricted to only black people, then you know that you can make that assumption that everybody on that list is going to be black or African American in different combinations. If you look at a broader census that's recording everyone in different categories, then you know that you have to pay attention to whatever part of that or column that might reveal the race. Or, for example, with the federal census, up until a certain point, they omitted Native Americans being enumerated in their census, except those who had become assimilated and who did not retain their tribal affiliation. So then you have to look at that data in a different way. And I could go on and on and on about this.
You got a question?
And then what I'll just briefly say is there are lots of guides in the genealogy field, lots of publications that focus on specific types of records or specific groups or different areas in terms of identifying the records that are available to you. And if you don't know any other name, it's going to be, there's this one reference guide that's been compiled. It's called the Red Book. And what happened is years ago, they conducted surveys of records in every state from the beginning of our country, roughly until the 20th century, to identify the different levels of government, the different types of sources, libraries, historical societies, archives, everything under the sun. So that's a good reference guide to you in terms of finding resources that are in the area that you're researching, where your ancestors lived.
You had a question?
Yeah, I have a question. So you keep referring to Ancestry.com and other
Yes.
This is one.
Yes.
service that you
Yes.
use, and I know
Yes.
there's so many. I know 23andMe
Yes.
seems to be getting
It's
more
the
popularity.
it's the largest.
So my question is it, are you advising that we just focus on one company, or does it make sense, information sakes,
What are
to
we
focus on
talking
different companies?
Well, with me, with Ancestry, and that's really with Ancestry, you can build your tree.
Okay.
I'm not really familiar with 23andMe, but we kind of focus primarily on Ancestry.
Okay.
Not for all of our research, because we go to courthouses and Library of Congress, and wherever we have to go, we've gone. So, but as far as building that tree, it just seems to be a little bit more user-friendly. And where I started at, from the beginning, was my great-grandparents, and a secret. So that's how I started my genealogy research. And I was talking to a great uncle, and it was basically on his deathbed, and he said, so we have a madam in the family. And I'm like, madam? You're like, hi, madam? He said, no, I'm madam. But he didn't give me a name or anything, and I kind of tucked it, in the back of my head, didn't think anything of it, until I started really doing the research. And then my cousin Brandon and I, when we met, and we were talking, and I said, same thing. I heard that we had a madam in the family. And within 5 minutes, we were able to find her on the internet.
Part of the reason why I mentioned Ancestry, it's the most popular sources, it's the largest.
It's the largest.
Okay. Is it just as useful for, my family is from the islands.
Okay.
I'm not even first generation American, because
Ancestry has the largest number of databases. It's the largest company in the world that provides access to genealogy records, or records. Family Search, the Mormon Church is the foundation behind most of the genealogy initiatives in this country, in terms of personal research and also technological developments and actually the research process. So it's part of their expression of their religious faith, which is to document their ancestry, which is why they have dedicated a good deal of money and effort. They created a nonprofit to support genealogical research. So they also created a resource which is called familysearch.org, which is a free service. You have to set up an account to access their information, but they are basically the driving force behind most of the genealogy business that's being conducted in the country now. They are the largest. Family Search is the nonprofit free access point. Ancestry is, you can access it through a paid subscription, personally at home, or you can access it at your public library. They have what they call a library edition, which provides access to most of the same genealogy databases that you would be looking for if you pay for it. but the difference is they limit it and restrict it because they're in the business of making money off of it. And so for Caribbean and international sources, Family Search, because it's part of their church, well, they're using part of that to recruit members into their church. So they have members who are traveling all over the world, negotiating with countries and governments to record information. So that in terms of looking at some of the international sources, without spending a lot of money, I would recommend that you go to Family Search. I know that they collected records in the Caribbean. I can only tell you that I know that I've actually looked at records for Jamaica, I think Trinidad, they have some. Ancestry does have databases, international databases, but you have to pay even more beyond the basic level subscription to access their international record sources. So I would suggest that you try Family Search first, primarily because it's free, also because they have a lot of tutorials on how to get started. They focus on looking at certain specific records, census records, birth records. They have webinars that they host, videos, articles, everything under the sun. They also have members who are volunteering for live chats. If you need assistance in looking at any of their record sources, you can either conduct an online chat, or you can pick up your phone for an 800 chat with 800 number to do that. I recommend that you start and spend as little money as possible. Learn as you go. You may, if you have the time, join the Genealogy Society, or if you have a limited amount of time and you don't want to spend any money or whatsoever, go on YouTube. There are thousands of videos about how to get started. And also look on Facebook and social media. There are all sorts of groups that are focused on, there are groups that are focused on preserving photographs. There are African American groups. There are those who are focused on groups from specific countries. There are groups focused on researching your ancestry if you're adopted, DNA testing, everything under the sun. So what this is to say, there is an abundance of information to help you get started. Every little bit is going to help you learn something. And the best way to approach it is free. I always say,
free works for me.
Free. And then, when you get to the point where you have a compelling story to research. For example, she knew she had to eventually go to Fargo or someone in her family had to eventually go there on foot to do this. That's when you start spending the money. Here's my formula. I know that if I have to leave home to go anywhere and spend any amount of time to do research, think of the cost of getting there, hotel, food and everything. It's gonna start at, if you're there a couple of nights, it's $1,000 to find one answer. So do everything that you can do while you're at home or from home before you start moving out there. Or if you have family who's still living in that area, or you have someone else who could possibly work with you, and they are living in the area where your ancestors were, see if you can find them, or you can set up a correspondence with someone, contact the libraries in the area. The genealogy community is very giving, and we have through social media, there are people who are willing to do research for you. They'll say, I'll do a lookup for you. What's the name and the time and the era in which you're looking. There are a lot of people who are very generous with their time, so I would suggest that. But in terms of resources, getting back to your question, why Ancestry? It's the largest resource. We have probably the largest percentage of the genealogy community in the U.S. using those resources. And as she mentioned, as part of that process, you have access to building a family tree that you can make public, and it connects you to other researchers. So that's one way that they provide access to the resources and connect you to other potential relatives.
Okay.
That's why.
Before you follow through, Sharon, we're going to take another question here. I'm going to open the mic up online so other people can ask some questions that are on the phone. And then we're going to finish off with our last two topics, okay? So Siobhan, go ahead.
Okay, so what I like about Ancestry, first of all, I think about 20 people in our family have taken the Ancestry DNA test. And when you get your results back, it breaks down your ethnicity by percentages. And so everything that I was always told about my ethnic background is totally false from what I found out. So basically, it gives you a breakdown. So my breakdown was 66% Western European, 33% African American, and 1% Polynesian. So, and then in addition to breaking down your ethnicity, Ancestry will then also connect you with other people that have taken the test that also has your similar DNA. And then you can send them a private message. And so that's what I did. It actually connected me with several first cousins I never knew, some second cousins and third cousins. And you can contact them and have a conversation to find out more about your family. So it's not just about creating a tree. You can connect with other people that you are related to that you have never knew. Yeah.
Carol?
So you mentioned family trees. That's what I wanted to ask about. So, a lot of our families have, shall we say, a non-traditional structure.
Right.
And I noticed that with Ancestry.com and even with MyHeritage.com, it's very cut and dried on how you build your family tree, the traditional nuclear family. Are there any that have a little more flexibility in how you build those trees?
No. Well, straight answer.
Straight
no.
answer.
Straight answer, no. And this is it's built on the premise of a nuclear family. And I've been working with Family Search to try and I'm not the only person. I'm just encouraging it from the African American perspective to get them to create more of a what we would call a sandbox genealogy structure, because the nuclear family is an ideal that hasn't persisted at all since humans started procreating. One trick that you can use with Ancestry, or some of the online resources for creating digital family trees, is you can set up multiple ones. Ancestry gives you the option of creating multiple family trees.
Mirror trees.
So in the structure, they allow for birth, marriage, and death. And they also are inputting the option for divorce. So what one could do is to circumvent part of those restrictions is to, and I think actually the tree is now expanding a little to say partner. You can define it as either a spouse or a partner. But one other way that you could, pardon me, circumvent that part structure is to add that person as a spouse and then treat them as divorced. And what it does is it adds a dotted line to say that they're on family trees. The dotted line means that they're divorced, but it still retains them in the family structure. That's one way to circumvent it in the current process, the current structure. What I have been advocating, and I've been talking to representatives from Family Search, because there's another division that is really focused on nothing but creating technology for genealogy. And so what we've been suggesting is that they create structures that are very fluid, so that you get to define what that family is. Right now, you would more or less have to take software, graphic software, and create your own structures to do that. The person who creates that software is going to be very wealthy. And the reason being is nowadays we have so many different structures. Now that gay marriage is legal, so we don't have structures outside of a male and a female and a child, or for adoption. We don't have structures that incorporate the reality of a birth parent, a birth father, a birth mother, and then an adoptive mother, adoptive father, and so on and so forth. And what do you do when they divorce? And how do you add them in there? Or with genetics now, in which we're having people who are egg donors and sperm donors. Mom and dad have never ever met, or mom has met one, or right now there are women in India who are surrogate mothers to American babies, and the children are being created in a lab, and they're being born in another nation, but they have American citizenship and their parents are here in the US, or their parents are donating sperm and eggs, and the people who are their parents that are going to raise them aren't genetically connected to them at all. And so we need these new structures to begin to reflect those kinds of family dynamics. And then if you throw the genetic part in it, which is what Ancestry is trying to connect with their services now, it's a hot mess. It really is.
Well,
you know?
also, Ancestry doesn't support slavery. So say you have an ancestor who was a slave and had a child by the master, you have to put them in Ancestry that they're that they're married.
Yeah, but again, you can circumvent part of that,
Right.
but the same scenario, when you strip away all of the different ways in which people are connected or disconnected or officially or legally connected, what it boils down to is how do you incorporate members who don't fit, family members who don't fit that structure, the nuclear family structure. How do you handle, for example, polygamy? And the Mormons did practice that at one point.
Yeah.
You know, how do you incorporate that into your family tree? How do you incorporate, and we know this in the African American community, where children are raised by a relative in the context of, and I have family friends where they came from a large family, and they had an aunt and an uncle who didn't have children. And one child was selected to be raised by this aunt and uncle. They maintained contact with mom and dad and brothers and sisters, but for the most part, they were raised in a different household. How do you reflect that in the reality of your family tree? The structure says one thing, the social upbringing says something else, and there are so many other creative ways in which families have been formed that we need to have some kind of a structure that allows for that fluidity for us to reflect that if we need that, or we can abandon that and come up with different charts, something else.
And we talked about that earlier this morning, and no matter what the DNA kit says, okay, that's your auntie. She raised you from the time you were knee-high to a grasshopper, okay? It doesn't matter if she's blood or not, that's your auntie. All right, so we all have relatives like that. So as we go further along and trying to figure out who exactly and what we are and where we came from, it's good to know that, as you pointed, why you're connected to this aunt and you're not blood relation, right? Oh, before we go any further here, anybody listening in have any questions? Raise your hand. Can't see it. Nope. Okay.
So can I? Oh, okay.
I just had a comment with the non-traditional structures as well as doing the DNA testing. I have a friend that found out she has a brother she did not know she had. So also when you go into genealogy, you may find things that are surprising, things that may shake up your entire family.
That's actually the next topic. The next topic is called
Leading out the closet.
Uncomfortable Truths.
Yeah, so there might be a lot of those that come up there. I found out, I've used Ancestry. I've gone to 1832 on one side. And I found out from, my father was in foster care at one point in time. He was in a big family. They didn't have a lot of money. He was the oldest, so they had him in foster care so that, you know, they could spend their money on the younger children. So he was ashamed of it, so he never told people, but it's something that comes up. I found a yearbook for the school that he was supposed to go to. He wasn't in the yearbook for his junior and senior year, and I had to ask him, why weren't you in there? Your sister and your brother were, because, you know, when you have 7 kids, they're kind of like right behind each other. And then he ended up telling me that. So there are like a lot of uncomfortable truths that make
Oh, yeah. Also, I want to say something about Ancestry. If you take the DNA test, there's another website called GEDmatch, and you can upload your raw data from Ancestry into GEDmatch. GEDmatch. It's a free service. So you upload your raw data, and then you can take someone else's GEDmatch number and your GEDmatch number and do a search to see if you're related. And if you go onto Facebook, like she mentioned, there's so many different Facebook groups. I think there's the Search Angels and just, by topics. And you will see people will post their GEDmatch numbers.
The other thing to be aware of is with the DNA testing, there are multiple companies that are conducting it. Ancestry prices it's sort of at the lowest, so that it gets the largest number of people. They have perhaps the largest number of database of people who have joined their databases. There's an African ancestry company that claims that it has the largest population of tested Africans and African Americans, but they haven't ever released their data for anyone to know or to be able to verify how true that is. There's also 23andMe. There's another company that conducts DNA testing, and there's several more that are surfacing that are doing something similar. Family Tree DNA is another one. It does perhaps the most in-depth analysis of your DNA along the male lines and the female lines. Ancestries takes it from the mitochondria of the cell, which means it's taking data from both your paternal side and your maternal side. The reason why a lot of people are using Ancestry is that it's combining the results of the DNA testing with access to the records and also the component where you can construct the family tree, so that when you have the missing pieces, maybe you have part of the DNA information that points you in a certain direction. Your family tree and the records that you use to construct it are supporting a family tree on some part of your chromosome to try and figure out if you match on the first chromosome and this other person, and you can identify your ancestor and they may not, you keep working to the point where you find a common ancestor. That's where genealogy, that's the hot topic right now, is DNA testing and how to use traditional genealogy techniques to go and find your ancestor. However, you can't get there without doing the research. The biggest problem with Ancestry and the DNA testing is that people are not uploading their family trees. So they're taking the test to find these ethnic percentages. They are estimations based on an ideal individual from an ideal world, an ideal African from Nigeria, which didn't exist when our ancestors were enslaved, an ideal person from Germany, which didn't exist prior to the formation of the country. So what this is to say is that these are estimations. They were based on calculations. There is no perfect anything. And what DNA is telling us now is we have the whole story reversed. Life began in Africa, or Homo sapiens came out of Africa, and the site that we all know, we're all familiar with, which is National Cemetery, Arlington Cemetery. There was once an African American community there. There's a rich story of the experience and blushing of
yeah, that's our family.
African Americans who were on that land, and all of the changes that they experienced from the period of the early years of when our nation was founded up until just the turn of the 20th century. Now, in terms of how does one approach the unexpected or these unusual discoveries or the surprises, if you approach it and this is how I say it, if you approach it from a spiritual perspective, there are things that you're gonna, if you have love in your heart and you have an openness in your mind, that you're going to make discoveries. You have to kind of like have the experience, have the reaction that you're gonna have initially, and sit in it and dwell in that. If it's surprising you, if it shocks you, if it hurts you, if it angers you, whatever, let yourself experience whatever that is. But then take a step back and try to imagine yourself the researcher, the objective researcher. What does this reflect? When I was looking at her story of being a madam, the question in my mind is, what happened in her life to choose that as a form of employment?
Why did she choose a sporting life?
You know,
We still can't figure that out.
And the other side of it is, you know, she didn't just choose it, she excelled at it.
Mm-hmm.
And she didn't just excel at it, she made money off of it. So what does it take in one's mind to take whatever the circumstances or the situation was that propelled her or put her in that place, to turn that around? It's that making the lemonade out of the lemon scenario. So if you find those unexpected surprises that might be the lemon in the story, figure out how to make it into lemonade. Or even if it's going to be a tragic story, look at it beyond just the tragedy. Try to find the humanity in that. Try to figure out or try to relate to the ancestor who experienced whatever, or the relative. You know, what's the relationship of finding a sibling that you didn't know? What's that? For me, my immediate family's gone. And not to say that I hope my dad was, you know, Rolling Stone, and, you know, if I had a certain sudden discovery of a relative, for me, I would have a different reaction because I don't have anybody left in my immediate family. So that would be a new relative to try to relate to. A big part of the experience that we've had in this nation has been one that's been very painful. There are some genealogists who focus on dealing with that pain, facing it, and trying to find a way to heal from that. Try to take something good out of it. You know, no matter what comes to you, try and figure out something positive that you can take away from it. Look at the experience. With it being an ancestor, we're removed from it to a certain extent. If it's someone who's still living, sometimes it's a lot more painful. That's another name to put on there. I mean, there's some people who actually have competitions to see how many names they can put on a tree. You know, try and find something positive about that experience to take away from it.
I'd like to say one more thing. As far as, and I think everyone needs to know this, when you take the Ancestry DNA test, please be aware that law enforcement can subpoena your results. So that's, you know, they can, you know.
That's interesting.
Well, the other issue with that, this is a big issue that is the big question that I get with visitors coming to the center and asking us, you know, do you recommend that I take the test, and what are the pros and the cons of it? There's a reality that we don't know in terms of what our government is actually doing with everything.
That information.
So when we go to take blood tests, when we go for our annual physical, we trust that it's only going some places. We sign forms to say whatever. We don't really know. And I say this because I think of the Tuskegee experiment,
right,
where these men volunteered and they were told one thing and something else happened to them. The government, after, you know, so many decades, has apologized, but that didn't stop the experiment from going on for decades. And so a lot of what we do in life, we think we have control over, and we don't. If you are curious about your ancestry, the DNA tests and the results are only a snippet or only a tiny little bit of information. The reality is that you don't inherit 100% of the DNA from your ancestors. Each time there's a union, it's a unique combination. And so you don't get 50% from your mother and 50% from your father, and they didn't inherit 50% from their parents. Each time it's a scramble, it's the big scramble, and you end up with this unique, wonderful being that is the ancestor that's you, or, you know, down to you. You only get bits and pieces. If you are looking to do if you're looking to explore DNA testing, know this: if you have multiple siblings, or you're going to test your parents or other relatives, test their siblings as well. I was fortunate enough to get my brother to agree to test. I felt really bad about it, but he was in the hospital dying, and I asked if he would take the test. And I was never able to share the results with him. But in analyzing it, when we got beyond the level of first cousins, it was as if we came from different families altogether. There were groups of people who tested who didn't match with my DNA. So I had to spend time trying to match with the results that he received and compare them with to see if there were any people who overlapped. Now, I knew most of my cousins, and there are people who have popped up in generations closer than they should, because I know, well, I have been able to document all the known first cousins, and I've got a whole family who are coming up in that first cousin range who I have no idea how they came to be. Now, the challenge for me is that they did not include a family tree. So what I've had to do is look at who they match in the DNA and see if any of those individuals have put up a family tree, and to go and search that. So I have about 30 different trees that I'm trying to piece together of different DNA matches. I just call them research because I don't know,
you don't know
exactly how we're connected. What I want to encourage you to do is, if you don't really want to jump into genealogy yet, you're not ready, you don't have a story or whatever, start with yourself. We tell you, you go from the present to the past. Everyone in here is successful. Everyone in here has accomplished something. Everyone here has overcome some obstacle. Chart that, record it. Try and go from the past, which is your birth, up until now. If you haven't already done this, if you have papers, little things that are mementos or reflections of your life, try and gather them in a central place. You could go to a craft store and get, they have these acid-free boxes for storing paper for scrapbooking. They're acid-free. They don't cost that much, maybe less than $10 a piece. If you have mementos from things, if you don't already have a place where you have them gathered, try and gather them. Make sure that you have some of the most important documents together, gathered in a place. Focus on purchasing things that are acid-free so that it doesn't damage what you already have. If you have photos, try and make sure that you're storing them in acid-free containers. If they're already in photo albums, if you have photo albums you've inherited from family members, and they're in the old-fashioned folders, photo albums, and if you have the ability to do it, try and remove them from that or make copies of what you have. Since we're all living in a digital age, if you have a scanner or you have your phone, try and make copies of everything. And the other reason for that is we never know when disaster is going to strike. Look at the people from 9/11. Look at all the offices where all of their records were destroyed in New York. Think in terms of, contemporary disasters. Think of flooding. You want to preserve your documents in some way so that if there is some kind of a disaster, you can recover some of that information. Think in terms of also, and this is sort of what I do now, if you're suddenly, I laugh at this, if aliens suddenly came and, pulled us all away, what would be left of your life? Or what evidence exists of your existence? Yes. I mean, we're in the next, I take it to an extreme, but, but anyway, because if you think about it, when we were taken from Africa.
Well, I was just going to go there. It
was very similar
Those were
to
aliens.
being taken by aliens.
It was no Wakanda, so yeah.
Well, what Brandon and I did, we've created our Massey Family Facebook page. So every document that we have, we uploaded onto our Facebook page for our family to share with our family. all pictures. We encourage our family, whatever, go through all the old boxes, share what you have. Even funeral programs. We've uploaded all of our funeral programs onto our Facebook page, but we also have a family a family website. And all of our pictures that we scan, we put them on a thumb drive. And also, was it Dropbox?
Yes.
Another one that we use. So we're kind of like backing up all of our information because we don't want it to get lost. We don't want, my great grandkids down the road to have to, go look for the same information that we've already, discovered. So.
Okay, so this is a good point.
And I have one other plug, and I almost forgot about it. With the museum, we had a donor. His name is Robert Frederick Smith. He's I think the first African-American male billionaire. And he donated more than $23 million to the museum.
Ooh.
Part of the proceeds of part of that funding was used to help create our Family History Center. And one of the initiatives that he's supporting is called the Community Curation Program, and that's communitycuration.org. And what that is doing is encouraging all of us to become citizen curators, which means if you have a story to tell about yourself or anyone in your family, if you have a photograph or a document or something that you want to share with the world through the museum, you can go to that website and upload your content, and it will be available for research. Now, it could be something as simple as, everyone here,
yeah.
You've accomplished something. What's your career about or something? How did you come to be whatever it is that you are? What was the path that led you to where you are now? If you want to interview your mother, your father, just another relative, or an elder in your community, if you wanted to even focus on an area of your community, you can upload that content to our website.
What's the website one more
It's
time?
communitycuration.org. And it's designed for you to be able to use your phone to record whatever the content is. You can take a photograph with your phone. It's ideally, the ideal scenario is if you're on the go and you want to capture information, if you want to even record an event, a historic event on the go, you can just use that and upload it to the website. The other side of it is when or if you visit the museum or anywhere you're visiting and you have content, you have commentary that you want to add. You could, for example, visit the museum and look at one of the exhibits, and we've had this actually happen, that we've had visitors identify themselves in photographs. We may have a crowd of someone attending an event, or there was a young woman who was featured on the cover of, I think it was Ebony magazine when they used to do the college campus queens. So she was able to not only identify that she was the person on the cover, but she told us these stories about meeting the staff and what that was like, and meeting Robert Johnson and how congenial he was, just everything. Content that we wouldn't have been able to capture, content that wasn't going to be published in the magazine. So there are all sorts of stories that are cropping up, or for example, we have in the Family History Center, aside from the interactive, we have items from our collections. There were old irons and a mirror and a comb and items like that. We've had people come up and say, my grandma had an iron like that, and I remember so-and-so, and they were able to tell us another story that we wouldn't otherwise have heard about how it was used. That sort of thing. It's not just simply, it brings that into light, and you get brings it to life, and you get a different context about how it was used and the significance that it had for another African American. Content that we wouldn't necessarily get from just standing and looking at it in an exhibit case. So I really encourage you to make one contribution, if you can, because the more stories that we have, the more examples that we'll have that reflect the richness of African American culture.
In the community.
There's no one story.
Okay, so we went over.
Yes. And we didn't get to do.
Well, no.
Okay.
We went over, but we're good because I had actually planned for a little bit extra time. So I want to take a quick 5-minute break, and then we're going to resume, and then we'll do closing thoughts, and Sharon is gonna cover something on the aftermath of Melvina and the DNA results and stuff, okay?
Jane, can I just add, when Sharon mentioned that in addition to Bible, when you said funeral programs, because we've actually gotten information from that as well.
We save all of ours.
Right, if you can find like the older ones in the funeral, they may have said, sister, they
Right.
mention stuff that you may not have known, but it'll be in those older programs.
We save all of ours.
And be careful about the names and the relationships on those.
Right, but I mean, it gives you a starting point.
Yes,
sometimes.
yes, yeah.
Also, another thing that Brandon and I, well, actually more so Brandon, he travels around to different towns where our family lives, and he videotapes, he actually interviews the elders in our family, like oral history. Yeah, and so we also share that on our Facebook page as well as YouTube. We have so many videos on YouTube. And you'd be surprised the information that, we have a couple aunts that are up in their 80s, and they're like, oh, I don't remember anything. But as soon as you start talking to them, they start remembering, everything. So, but it's also nice to have because for future generations, they might have heard about Aunt Pearl, but they never met Aunt Pearl. But they can go back and see the videos.
And hear the nuances in their voices and everything.
Take this 5-minute break, and then we're gonna finish up.
Oh, no, I don't need to. I only need to sit a little bit.
Okay. Team Melvina t-shirt that I'm giving away, okay? And I'll give the t-shirt away and you'll get a hug from Miss Sharon. So I'm trying to figure out how I'm gonna do that. I'm not gonna be like, basketball games when they just throwing stuff around. Why not? So I guess I'll just ask a question. How's that? Right? And the question would be, what's the best resource, free resource to get genealogy information? Anybody?
The local library.
Local library?
But she said the family search dog.
Ding, 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 she got it, all right. You see how that works? Man.
Okay, so I don't have XXL, is that okay?
I need extra.
We were just discussing We're Related. Have anyone heard of We're Related? It's an add-on to Ancestry. Okay, so it's an app that you can put on your phone if you already have your tree established on Ancestry, and you upload the app, and what they will do is tell you what famous people you're related to. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, like for me, they're saying that Donald Trump is my second cousin.
I want some money then.
No, but yeah, so
Maybe
seriously.
you can go talk to him.
No, thank you.
I'm saying.
But yeah, so like they've linked me to like 20 U.S. presidents and everyone from let me see, Patsy Cline, which I did verify that she is my cousin. Kenny Lattimore is also a cousin. That was verified. What's the governor of Howard County? The former governor?
Howard County?
Well, yeah, Howard, yeah. The governor, Howard County was named after the former governor.
Oh, yeah, of Maryland.
Of Maryland.
I can't remember.
I can't think of his name, but anyway, he's like my eighth cousin,
Well, see, here's the thing. All that's going into this next piece where she's going to reveal some things to you, because that's really how they're related. So, the DNA, we spent about what, 20 minutes on DNA? So here's what happens when you go through and you track down your DNA, and this is the fruits of what could possibly occur. And Sharon will tell you some things with that.
Okay, so I guess I'll start with Melvina. So you guys know that she was infamous madam, born a slave in Loudoun County, Virginia, 1838. 1838. And she was owned by a guy by the name of John Ross. And she had
This conference is being recorded.
She had a child by a gentleman by the name of Dr. Joseph Glass Gray, also of Loudoun County, Virginia. We've gone as far back as Malvina's grandmother, Mima, who was a slave. We think that she was owned by the Carter family. And from there, Henry, her son, also was born into slavery, married a woman by the name of Anna Jackson Howard. She was also a mulatto slave born in Fairfax County, Virginia. And interesting thing about Anna is that the dynamics of that was really interesting, because Anna's mother, Cecilia, had a child by Henry Lee Howard of the Gooding family. Anna actually took her father's last name. He was a slave owner, but he raised her as his own. So we're thinking that on the outside, it was a slave-master relationship, but on the inside, they were really cohabitating consensually. Because Anna, again, took her father's last name. She named all of her children after members of the Howard family, so that they kept a relationship. We have documentation where property was given to Cecilia and Anna's brother, what's his name, Frederick?
Frederick.
Yeah, Frederick. Some other interesting things that we found out, Malvina was actually engaged to the father of Benjamin O. Davis. If you know who Benjamin O. Davis is.
Army General,
First U.S. General of the United States Army, yeah. And another interesting fact is, he actually jilted Malvina. She took him to court and sued him. The case was settled out of court. It was for breach of promise for marriage. So it was settled out of court, so I guess in essence she did win. So that was really interesting, that whole tie-in that, you know, she was engaged to our first, the son of the father of the first African-American general.
Now, what was really interesting about that, and Hollis had mentioned this previously, about finding this information wherever you can find it locally. And we looked up articles on Malvina Massey, and some of the articles talked about trials.
Right.
And so we were able to then trace the trials back, and this name kept popping out, and we never really pulled that thread about who this man was that she sued. And when we did that, that's when Benjamin O. Davis popped up.
Exactly. So there's newspaper articles out there. I mean, we were actually surprised how many articles was done on Malvina. She's very popular, I guess you could say. But back to Anna, another interesting fact is Anna's, well, I guess you should say my 5 times great-grandfather, who's Anna's great-great-great-grandfather, was one of the wealthiest landowners of Fairfax County. His estate, 2,300 acres, was part of Ravensworth, which was actually 54,000 acres, and it was broken into parcels and sold. So William Gooding Jr., my 5 times great-grandfather, owned 2,300 acres of Fairfax County, and that's actually the entire length of Little River Turnpike from Fairfax to Alexandria. They owned a tavern called Gooding's Tavern. If you're familiar with where Nova, Northern Virginia Community College is in Annandale, that was where their plantation sat. And then across the street, there's a cemetery there. Right now it's called Pleasant Valley. And actually, I would say 80% of my family, Virginia family, is buried there. What's really crazy about that is that was the site of Gooding's Tavern, right? But which our 5 times great-grandfather owned. But if you go in the woods to the right of the cemetery, all of the Gooding family is buried there. So think about that. The slave owners are buried over in the woods, and all their descendants of Anna and Cecilia are buried in the cemetery. So That's another pretty interesting fact. Now, touch base on Melvina as far as relocating to Fargo. We have no idea why she got into the business, but she was a very shrewd businesswoman. And at first we thought that she made all of her money running brothels. And by the way, her brothels were based on income. So she, I guess she liked to spread the wealth, but the largest brothel that we have of her is called the Crystal Palace, and that was for the elite of Fargo. So prior to her arriving in Fargo, she had hand-drafted invitations delivered to all of the wealthy men of Fargo. And to kind of put this in retrospect, there was at least 6 people of color that lived in that area at that time. And when she arrived, I guess you could say they didn't realize what her nationality was, and she wasn't purposely passing. She just let their bias dictate how they treat her. She wasn't going to offer any information. But in addition to running brothels, we later found out that she was also bootlegging. And we have her as far up as Chicago, all the way up in Canada. So this was a very well-traveled woman, and she was all about making her money.
And her husband.
And we found this out recently, which is, we recently found out her husband was actually white. They married in 1880. So his name is Henry Ray. He was a slickster. He actually, when she was on her deathbed, he tried to, actually he didn't just try, he got her to sign over some of her property to him. But when she got better, she took him to court and got her property back. So she would sue you with a drop of a hat. The woman didn't play. Yeah, she did. Another interesting fact about her, she was actually put in prison, but I call it prison on paper, because she didn't spend any days behind bars. She actually spent her 7 months at the penitentiary, and this was a penitentiary with just white men. She spent her 7 months actually living in the warden's house with the warden and his wife and his kids. So she never spent one day behind bars for her 7 months. Anything else interesting about?
And I know I saw all these different looks of amazement go about everybody's faces. So we pulled that thread, and in all honesty, we pulled that thread, and we were trying to discern if that was an actual fact, or was this just part of the legend and myth about Melvina in that area. So we could not disprove it, put it that way. The evidence states that there were female prisoners, there were female accommodations at the time. They were so bad that the then warden had went out in his annual report to say, these accommodations are too bad, I need a female matron here to take care of these women. And so you look at Melvina at the time of her incarceration, she was 63 years old. So she wouldn't have been able to survive there in those areas, but so maybe that was it. It could have been maybe her status too. Maybe she had a favor she called in. We just really can't discern the truth and the fact in that. But we do know that the living quarters for the females was atrocious. It was really bad. So I'm just, the leap of faith is, yeah, that might be true, and then we don't really know. And we did a lot of that, not a lot, but we did some of that within the book, and we tried to let people know up front, hey, this is where the facts are, this is where we've took a couple of liberties, and this is where we made good fiction, to tell the story. But by and large, a lot of what you read in the book is about Melvina. There's a fascinating woman, fascinating time. Hollis had talked about, you have to actually look and filter a bunch of things out and think, could this actually occur? And the reason why we lean to the fact that first of all, there are no pictures of Melvina. That survived. That we know of. So we had to lean on the fact that Okay, so how does a black woman go into Fargo, North Dakota in the 1870s, own property, eat at all these ritzy establishments? How does that happen? Well, in 2016, I'm thinking, that don't happen. I know America, that didn't happen if she was known to be black. So what happens if you have a mulatto who's so fair and really could look white based on her genealogy? What happens then? Is she afforded all these courtesies? Well, she goes in, they treat her real nice. She buys property, because women buying property in the 1870s, well, that was, forget about that. That didn't really happen. You had to inherit property, and then you had to have a male heir with you, in most cases.
Well, we have a copy of her will. It was very impressive.
And so the woman lived a very interesting life, and especially within Fargo in the Minnesota area, territory. The bootlegging aspect raises some concerns for us because they chased her down for bootlegging, but she really was only convicted for selling a couple of drinks out of her brothel, and we're thinking that couldn't have been it, because right across, North Dakota was a dry territory at the time, dry state. But right across the river in Minneapolis, in Moorhead, Minnesota, you had 400 bars. So there's a big calling for booze. So how could she make money? Well, she could make money bootlegging, bringing in booze into Minnesota, and then every now and then selling a little booch in her brothels over in Fargo. And she made a lot of money. She made a lot of money. Woman was counted as saying that her husband had spent at least $100,000 gambling. So $100,000 back in the 1880s, 1890s. Well, that's, you're talking millionaire money nowadays. But
well, also she was paying a monthly fine. She would go down to the courthouse, pay her fine, and then they leave her alone. I mean, she pretty much was paying the salary for the mayor and the sheriff and everybody else in City Hall. That's how much money she was raking in.
yeah, that was commonplace for the Old West. They had these sin laws or taboo laws, wherein they would allow prostitution as long as you paid your fine, because that's how the streets got clean, that's how the deputies got paid, and so that's what they would do, the sin tax.
But also remember that they shut all the other brothels down.
Correct.
And left her alone.
They would go through these different phases. At this point in history is helpful. You had the women's suffrage movement. You had also the temperance movement, where booze, alcohol was a big thing. They were trying to get rid of alcohol. So you had a lot of these things going on, as well as they would try to be morally upright. So prostitution and alcohol and booze, they didn't want that anywhere near their pristine city. So Melvina survived all of them, all of these purges. She survived all of them, and because she was shrewd as well as crafty, and she had money she could bank on. But closing thoughts.
I wanted to interject a lot of things, just as I was listening to the story. The way that I approach all of the stories that I listen to, in the genealogy context, we look at every story as a case study. You know, what's going on? How do you prove the family or whatever you're proving? What's the story? What's the takeaway part of it? And for me, what I look at with every story is, you know, what's the premise? What do you start with? And what do you discover? And you try to extract some of the things, the techniques. What did it take for them to find this information? What kinds of documents did they consult? Because what you're going to do is learn something from that process. We're talking about assumptions of what an African-American woman could or couldn't do in the 19th century. We're way off. We don't understand. Unless we have these examples of the stories and the documentation,
Yep.
we gain a better understanding of what really happened, or some of the facts related to what happened at that time, what was possible. With each instance of that revelation of something that contradicts your belief, ask yourself, where did that come from? Why do I have that belief? And then as you examine the evidence, You try to look at history from a different perspective. What we think was possible or what we think was impossible is irrelevant.
Yep.
Because everybody has lived a life, a very unique life, even today. If you think of what you've accomplished in your life compared to what you thought you could ever accomplish. So when you look at these examples, look for some of how that reflects on now. And then also, as you're exploring it, that helps you to redefine your understanding of history. So take that away from it. Also, I'm always looking for the documents. If you're going through each step and documenting your ancestor, always ask yourself in terms of, I have an ancestor I don't know anything about, or there's something compelling about them and I don't know. What am I going to look for? Or if I make a discovery, how am I going to handle that information? Try to find parallels with your own story, your own research, to help you become a better researcher, to help you develop better skills of analysis. So this is what I take away from everything. I learn from everyone else's process. I find new discoveries, things that I didn't know of. Her story adds, in my mind, to an overall history of, here's something that I didn't know, I didn't know African Americans were living in North Dakota or Minnesota that early in the 19th century. My area of expertise is on African Americans from Virginia. So I'm interested because that adds another story for me. Someone migrated from Annabelle, Virginia to somewhere out west. So for me, that's a new chapter of history that I can explore. Try and find a way, aside from just researching your own ancestry, to learning more about broader African American history. Do that.
What I would say is, when you're starting to conduct your research, be careful what you ask for. Meaning, you don't know what's in that closet. And you need to prepare yourself, because some of the things that we found out, in addition to, Malvina, I mean, I'm proud of her, because a woman of color back in the 1800s only had several options. But it took us a little while. I have family members that are still embarrassed. They won't claim it. I don't want anyone in my family to know that my 3 times great grandmother was, into prostitution. But hey, that was the times. That's what it is. But we found out other things. For example, we found out that on my dad's side of the family, that my great grandfather actually shot my great grandmother, and then he swallowed poison and committed suicide. And so you definitely have to be careful, be prepared for not just the good, but be prepared for the bad, because you just don't know. That's
excellent. That brings this first panel to a close, and I want to thank Sharon for her insights, and I want to really thank Hollis Gentry for just giving us the skinny on all of this. This genealogy is a trend, and it's going to get even more. And the next giveaway question is, what is the center called at the African American Museum of History and Culture, where you can do all of your family research? Anybody? She mentioned it earlier a few times.
Not allowed to answer.
Who's Kanisha, you can answer. You can answer, Kanisha.
The communitycuration.org, is that what you're talking about?
No.
That's the name of the center.
But that's good though. That's close. That's close. You can get there from there. Anybody else? The first word in the answer is family.
Family Resource Center.
Family research.
Family genealogy.
The second word in the answer is history.
Let me see if somebody online.
Family History Center?
History Center.
Family History Center?
Ah, you got it. Family History Center. Hey, all right, we have a winner. And for those of you that are listening online, I have a special giveaway for you, and I will send that out later today or first thing in the morning. But everybody who's listening, you're gonna get something too. But yes, family histories.
Thank you.
Yes. That's the resource. I got one t-shirt. All right, thank you for your time. And the next panel is going to start in about, I'd say about 25 minutes or so. All right? And that's on women in business, entrepreneurs. We've got the best ones here. They're gonna tell you how to get out of your own way. All right?
Conference recording has
under the small business segment as well, and really have been enjoying myself so far. I've always been intrigued by genealogy, so that's definitely a good thing. And I watched the show Know Your Roots on PBS, so it's just like a deeper dive into that.
Nice.
It's been really helpful so far.
Nice.
Hello everyone, Clark Harris. I'm in Small Business Solutions as well. I actually just submitted my ancestry DNA test and should be getting my results in 2 weeks, so you guys help me out.
Wow, yay! All right. And to the left, we have...
Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Canty. I support the Global Public Sector Solutions Group here at AT&T. I was definitely, fascinated and intrigued, by a lot that was shared, and it has inspired me. My family, we've kind of interviewed the elders and all that, but we really didn't go to the next step, right, which was to really, kind of dig down. I did find that, I do know that my family is from the South Carolina area. I'm originally from Philadelphia, and I found that there's, that my family has a family reunion, I think every other year down in Georgia. I'm like telling my dad, we really need to go. We really need to go. And so this has really inspired me to really, to follow up with that, commitment. And I think not only for, so I have a sense, but more so for my children to really understand, who they are, really have, get that identity, rooted within them as well. So, thanks.
Hi, I'm Tyrone Umrani. I've been with the company for a bit now. I am in the Global Public Sector Customer Service Organization here in Oakton, Virginia, and I too enjoyed the first part of the presentation. I'm very interested in tracing my family's history and have started a few times and kind of let it go, but this has inspired me to take it a step further. And then I also look forward to the second part because my daughter is a budding entrepreneur, so I promised her I would take good notes.
Oh, I'm Okam Mears. For those who don't know me, I'm the president of the nation's capital chapter. I work in finance, been in finance for some years, and I support everyone.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does. Okay, so, and everybody knows me. I'm James, and I'm gonna leave it at that. This panel, okay. So why did I assemble these three individuals? Actually, it was going to be 4 and 5, but they couldn't be here. So we went down to 3, but we got 3 of the best, right? So I'm going to let them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about what they are, what they do, and how they came to that. But I'm going to interject what I know about them too, okay? So, Kanisha, could you please start?
Sure. My name is Kanisha Williams. I'm an independent author specializing in speculative fiction. I created the Black Girl Magic Literary Magazine in 2015. I just got an Amazon bestseller tag for an anthology that I'm creating. And that is an anthology of all Black women writing horror. It's called Black Magic Women, Scary Sisters. And I used to work for the government as a financial management analyst. So it's quite a departure for some people, but I went to college and my major was English with a concentration in African diaspora literature and language, so it's not too big of a departure once you hear that. And going into finance was really the departure. And I guess that's about it, right?
That's enough. But you know what? So Kanisha is, she's got this knack of finding that niche, okay? And so you're gonna see that a lot during this panel, is that we have different women that come to the same, go on the same journey and come to the same destination from different paths. And they all come with their own thing, okay? And the whole idea behind this is to get out of your own way and to move forward. Because believe it or not, you really are the future. You've always been the future for us. Sharon.
Okay. Well, as you know, I'm Sharon Downing, and I am the owner of iDowning Consulting. I have 10 years experience in talent acquisition, specializing in DoD, Intel, and cybersecurity. I've supported Pentagon, NSA, White House, FBI, Department of Homeland Security. Pretty much, if it's government and IT, I've touched it. In addition, on the social media side, I have about 30,000 contacts online between Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and I created and moderated one of the largest Facebook memory pages called Back in the Day, Northern Virginia, with 20,000 members.
So why Sharon? Okay, so we had this talk about diversity within IT, okay, specifically within the Silicon Valley. But IT and diversity, especially women, Black women, has been a serious issue going forward. And Sharon has that capacity to give you some insights into some of these companies that are doing better, okay, that'll help you with your career expansion as you want to grow. And you can stay right here at AT&T, you know, we're doing pretty good too. But you know, you have these different options. You always want to keep your options open. Our last but not least, Miss Anne.
Hi, my name is Anne Alston, and I am the CEO and founder of Alston Tech, which is a SBA woman-owned organization that provides career development, business consultation, mentoring, and so forth. I'm also president and executive director of Destination Achievers, which is a newly Maryland nonprofit organization that handles outreach programs for career and business development for special groups like seniors, low-income families, which we are going to be doing in 2018. And just like, you know, Sharon here, I too have an IT background, which I've worked in IT for 25 years and have learned how to master career transition through my own experience being an African-American woman in the technology space. And so using that knowledge and knowing what I have as far as my son's concerned is to bring awareness of the different industries and trends that is happening out here in the minority community. And so with that, I also created an online platform that brings awareness called the Business Men and Women of Color Podcast, which is an annual international program that highlights individual talents, speakers, authors, and so forth. And I'm also a award-winning mentor who's done a lot of mentorship with the students, with the Maryland Education Roundtable. I've also worked with the Business Leader Association and worked with the Prince George's Schools and University of Maryland University College. So I've done a whole lot to help with bringing that education to our youth and students.
And so, following the trend as well, so with Anne, so if you don't want to step out boldly and leave your company or corporation, how do you succeed? How do you make a lateral move, or how do you climb that ladder? This is the type of person that can tell you exactly what that means and how you do and go about it. So, with that said, I'm going to jump right into this. All right. So, my first question for the panel is, when did you desire to be your own boss? How did that come about?
I've always had the drive to be my own boss. I've always had that entrepreneurial spirit. I was raised that way. My family has owned various businesses in the Washington, D.C. area, so I learned that from them. I would say 10 years ago, I decided to, I just didn't want to keep punching that 9 to 5 clock every day. And so the opportunity came to contract myself out as my own boss to other companies. And I've just replicated that. So I've worked about 15 different contracts over the last 10 years. And so as a vendor, going and providing, extending their bandwidth for their recruiting initiatives. And I'm not a cookie cutter type of recruiter. You're not gonna sit there and find me at a job board all day. And these companies, staffing companies or whatever, they want you to recruit the way that they want you to recruit. And I like to recruit the way that I recruit. So I didn't really have a choice. So I decided to go off on my own.
Okay, so for me, I did not know I had an entrepreneur spirit. I really didn't. I was actually sort of forced into this situation, and it's not because I didn't want to, it's because back in the day when I was younger, I did not have, a 2-parent household. My dad died very early when I was a baby, and so we were raised by grandparents who were from the South. They had limited knowledge, limited education, and so at the age of 14, when I entered into the Marion Summer Youth Program, was when I had my first taste of actually just having a job. And I really loved it so much that I actually kept seeking that opportunity as a teenager, and every year I made it a point to have a job. With that said, because my mom at the time was not able to really take care of me the way, I was kind of forced to figure out, how do I take care of myself? How do I earn money to do what I need to do, like buy shoes and buy clothes and things of that nature? And I started to get with ladies who were doing really great things. They worked in the government, and they mentored me, and they showed me that I can go to school and I can have a job and I can have money and I can sing and I can do all these things. So as I grew up, I always felt like that I can be whatever I want to be and do whatever I want to do. So I kind of fell into the entrepreneurship as I was building my own career, and found that there were many people who were trying to do the same thing, and I kind of felt like that was my place, to be the platform to say you can have your job and you can be an entrepreneur too and still make your own rules. And so that's kind of how I got into that space. Yeah.
Kanisha.
Well, I am the first college graduate in my family. My parents they wanted me to go into the government. That was the secure way you'll be able to feed yourself, feed your family,
government job,
get your benefits. I'm an Army brat.
Go on.
Yeah, but my dad he always had a side hustle, as they say nowadays.
Hey.
He always had a side hustle, so I think I got my entrepreneurial spirit from him, because we were stationed in Europe, and he would go to Italy and go to some of the other countries and get leather goods and go send them back to the U.S. to his friends, the Fendi hats that were popular in the 80s and all that stuff. So I'll say I got that spirit from him, because my mother is more the safe route. She retired from being in the government for, I think, 33 years a couple of years ago. But I was working for the government, and I was working in Winchester, Virginia, so right outside of the metro corridor. And I would say, first of all, politics spurned me a little bit. We were seeing the rise of Trump. I was in Confederate land.
Yeah, you were.
And the sentiment that was coming up was almost dangerous. And I thought about the fact that I wanted, other Black people to feel like there was something reflective of them, because it wasn't reflective in the town I was living in at all. So that's why I started Black Girl Literary Magazine, is because I wanted to see literature that featured people that look like me, people that look like my family, and we certainly weren't getting it there. And I took a leap of faith, and since I was a financial management analyst, I did a spreadsheet and told my husband, I said, look, we can live on just your salary and give me a year. I said, give me a year. We can live on just your salary. I said, because I mean,
that's a good man.
Yeah, because daycare is another mortgage, and we have 3 kids. So I said, hey, we'll be cutting out a really big bill, and we can, and I will make dinner at home more. We can live on just your salary, but I had the data to back it up. And he said, go ahead. And I hit the ground running, and I've been running ever since.
Good. Now we're all smiling and we're all happy, right?
Can I add one thing?
Yes.
Did you notice the theme in everyone's story? Where did it start? Family, and the examples. And this is what I was talking about earlier.
Yep.
Of noting the influences of where you start in your story. That's all. I just wanted to bring that out.
Beautiful. Great. Caught it real good. So we got ideas. We're going to go out here. We're going to stake our claim. We're going to go out here on our own. Okay. What was the first year like, starting out? Anne.
Okay, that is really tough because what I found out was there wasn't a lot of resources for, it's sort of like a catch-22. There's resources that's out there on the internet. There are tons and thousands and hundreds of thousands of pages of what you should do to start a business. However, because of the African American stigma of where we are, it doesn't fit. It's like trying to put a square in a round hole. It just doesn't fit. So a lot of my struggle was really feeling like, where do I actually fit in? Because I'm at the corporate level facing adversities where I am in technology. And do I take that adversity and try to deal with it in my own business? And I had to figure out what is the one thing that I could do that would get me to move forward and get out of my own way, as you will, to not feel like I can't succeed in it. So I had to really dig deep, do my research, really dig into how am I going to fit into this environment as a small business owner and get the information. And that took a lot of phone calls, it took a lot of going to offices, it took a lot of reading, it took a lot of planning and all that. I actually spent like 6 months after I started my business and just, prepared for what I'm going to do the following year, because it's not like you can just start a business and start going out there, because what's going to happen, you're going to find out that you are at a way disadvantage than you originally thought. And so because of that, you have to really be this much higher than your counterpart, your Caucasian counterpart, or even the Koreans who have businesses. You're not going to be on the same level. So your ideals have to be like really, really high, your expectations have to be high, and you have to have thick skin when you fail to keep going. Because if you don't have thick skin, you're going to get upset and then you're going to quit. Right. So you're going to have to make sure that you know that you got to go through the trenches, and then on the other side it'll be so well worth it in the end.
Kanisha, how was that first year?
The first
Did
year,
you cook a lot?
I cooked a lot. The first year was also putting in a lot of my own money. For the literary magazine, we pay our writers. There are a lot of literary magazines that don't pay their writers at all. So I wanted to do that because I wanted the writers that came to me and trusted me with their stories, I wanted to let them know that their stories were valuable. And if I'm not paying you, how valuable are your stories, So the good thing was I did have the good government job before, so I had enough money to invest in my dream. Cooked a lot, dealt with being a stay-at-home mom for the first time, other than when they were babies. I stayed till they were like 9 months old. So juggling priorities, juggling business expectations. I had one of the funniest things, now it's funny, it wasn't funny at the time. One of the funniest things was when I came out with my magazine, someone felt that they owned Black Girl Magic.
Ooh.
They felt that they owned the phrase.
Okay.
And I was like, well, it's all over Twitter, so you need to sue a lot of people, you know?
Yeah.
And, but I had people coming at me on social media because they felt that I had stolen something. And I made my case on a website. I was asked to be interviewed right before that broke. I was asked to be interviewed by NBC Black.
Oh.
I was interviewed by them. S-Storm broke on Twitter.
Woo! She ain't black.
Exactly. NBC Black called me back. Hey, we want to talk to you again for a rebuttal on this. Okay, fine, because I felt I was in the right. Did the rebuttal. They came back. We're not going to run the story. It's too controversial.
Oh, wow.
Hey, okay.
Which could have propelled me farther faster, because NBC Black is such a huge, corporation and everything. I didn't let it get me down. I kept going. I made my case, and what happened was my product was so strong, you couldn't compare me to who thought they owned it.
There you go. There you go. Sharon.
First year for me was really scary because, of course, I had a corporate job with benefits and bi-weekly paycheck, and then going from being on contract, a 3-month contract or a 6-month contract, you don't know when the shoe's gonna fall. You don't know. You go in the next day and they're gonna tell you, I think we're gonna cancel the contract early or whatever. So to go through that first year and the uncertainty, it was really a scary time. But I kept getting contract after contract after contract. Now I'm on my 15th contract, and all the insecurities is gone.
Okay.
I had to believe in me.
There you go.
I had to believe in me. And I made sure that all my references are on point.
That's really important, to believe in yourself throughout the whole process, because a lot of times you think your ideas or your concepts is really sound when you put it on paper, or even if you try to do a business plan. But then if you don't have the value in what you're trying to do, and people don't see the value, then it just makes you trying to be an entrepreneur that much harder for people to actually come out and participate in whatever it is that you're trying to do.
And then you have naysayers.
Yes.
People that are negative, like, well, why don't you get a real job?
Yes.
Well, I have a real job. It's called Downing Consulting, and I own it.
There you go. So in 8 minutes, we're going to break so our panelists can have something to eat. But before we break, I wanted to go with one more question, and that deals with what are the requirements? You know, I mean, from your standpoint, from your view, if anybody wants to do this on their own, get out there on their own, what are the essentials they need starting out, day one?
Do your research first. That's the biggest thing.
So know your industry.
Know your
industry. Yeah.
And number two?
Yeah, I'll share just a really brief story. Back when I was a systems admin, and I had my side business, it was called A&M Creations. Back in the day, I did desktop publishing and general business, and I also did a little IT stuff on the side. And I did my business plan, I did a proposal, and I went to some people who I knew to invest in my business so that I can actually do more technology. And the first thing he said was, what experience do you have doing this outside of technology? What certifications do you have? What other type of people who are your resources that you have for this business before I would invest my money? And that was really a wake-up call for me, because you can't just go out there thinking you can just do anything. You have to set yourself in a position to get that thing. So if you're trying to be a career coach, a life coach, or anyone that's doing, federal contracts, you have to set your business up to make sure that you have your articles of incorporation, you need to have your EIN number, you need to be licensed as a business. If you try to do federal contracting, you need to have your SAMS registration, you now have your DUNS number. You have to be set up in so many different areas in order to participate and do what she's doing. Or if you're an author, you need to take the necessary studies to know how to write a book or publish a book or help someone to publicate a book and market that book. And if you're trying to be someone like myself that's gonna show education, you gotta have that backing behind you so that when people see you and they see your brand, they know exactly what type of experience that you have and what you can offer them, and it will be valuable to them. So that to me is setting yourself up so that you are setting yourself up for success and not failure, and not doing the research or preparing for that in advance. You're actually going to lose your first impression when you go out there and make that pitch to another organization.
And I want to harp on that because that's really essential, because we everywhere we go, we'll hear a story. Someone will say, I've got an idea, okay? And they'll talk to you for about 30 minutes and you're like, what actually are you trying to sell? So not doing the research, not being able to effectively articulate your dream so that it becomes everybody else's dream and they want to give you some money to make it happen.
Right, learning how to pitch your business is very important. It's no different than when you are trying to go out for a job. You are representing who you are, and you have to be able to articulate the best way that you know your skills, your abilities, and how you're going to bring value to that organization. So when you are pitching your business to someone, it's exactly the same way. In 30 seconds, people should know exactly who you are, what you do, and how you do it. And if you're not able to practice your speaking skills, to look them in the eye, to relate to them on some type of level, they're going to clock out in like 2 seconds of you talking to them, and they're going to find a way to end the conversation. So
last question.
Yeah.
Last question. I'm trying to feed y'all.
Okay.
Okay, so last question, and we're going to take a small break and we'll be right back to it now.
Yes.
But as women of color, okay, we're talking about having your plan and then being able to articulate that and speak to someone. Do you find that to be a difficult thing, being that you're women of color?
I would, yeah, you can have, go ahead, because I have a lot to say on that.
I was going to say that I'm kind of lucky in that the name of my brand tells you who I am.
Black girl magic.
Exactly. So I've had supporters and have supporters of all races.
There you go.
And I think it's because I'm able to find commonalities with people and speak from that place of what we have in common.
Yes, because we all have kids with parents. Everybody has that experience.
Right. And once you speak from that place, it's easier for people to listen to you. I was at a conference in Boston. I was literally one of maybe 15 to 20 black people that were there. The conference had 300 people. But I had conversations with all different types of people. They were very interested in all of the panels that we had that were focused on diversity. And right now, I would come at any conversation at a place thinking that the person wants to know more, because we are, no matter what Trump is doing, we are at a place where more people are interested in diversity.
Yes.
They are more interested in having diverse, for what I was on, they paid me to come there because they want diverse panels.
Yes.
IT right now, my best friend from college, she started an organization called HBCU VC, so venture capitalists that are funding tech ideas from HBCU graduates.
Yes.
And she does a lot of inclusive events and things like that. She's over in San Francisco in that tech corridor. People want diversity, even if it's to check a box. And I can be that box you check, but I'm going to talk to you and you're going to be my best friend at the end of the day.
There you go. Because your story's going to be long. Go ahead.
Well, can we be frank?
Let's be frank, and Jerry too.
Okay. The biggest issues that I've had in what I do is other people of color. That's where all my negativity comes from. People of color within corporate. Those are the biggest challenges that I've had dealing with attitudes, unnecessary attitudes, jealousy, and that's where I would say that was my biggest challenge, is dealing with that.
Yeah, and we So when we pull back that scab, that is something that we don't do well, you know, and it's one of the things that, you know, I wanted to explore a little bit more in this panel as we go on. And I know it's strange coming from a man, but when you have, you know, daughters, you know, you talk about sisterhood, and you talk about, hey, you need to be looking out for your sister, whether she's white, pink, purple, you need to be looking out for them, okay? Anne.
Okay, so I don't have that much to say because they pretty much covered most of it. Okay, because, you know, echoing what she was saying is that I try to be in a position where I'm neutral so that anyone of color is seeing me. And from the same token, the problems with other African Americans. And so from my perspective, what I see is we don't need the information because we have this already, or we have that already. They're not open, or we're not open to allow this information to come to us, even if we already know it, because we think that we have it all. And so for me, my effort is to break the barrier of that, to get us talking and sharing, and forget about the part of competition, or forget about the part of being jealousy, because there's so much work and so much opportunity for everyone, but we don't see that because we're busy focused on it's got to be mine, right? So my effort is, you know, when I build a podcast or a platform or any kind of vehicle for someone to voice what they have and what they do, is to educate and say, if I hadn't known, you know, I'm trying to take that excuse away. If I had known, you know, I get tired of hearing that. I wish I had been to this event. I wish I'd been to that event. But once they come out, they're so glad. You know, they're so happy that they did it, and then they decide to go do something else. So, you know, for anybody that's listening to this on the phone or anywhere else, I want to encourage people to open up and share and not be afraid to learn something new. No matter what gender or color or background you have, it's all about what can I learn from this person or these groups that will help me, and how can I give that information that I experience back to the community?
Correct.
Right.
And it transcends race and genders. I get asked all the time about, so you're an author, you know, I have an idea, blah, 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 and I go, let me hear it. You know, I'm open to that because I'll look at what you're doing and I'll give you some honest criticism. You know, I says, well, this needs more work. You know, where's this character going? Something like that, but I'm honest and upfront, and I welcome that because people were helping me when I first started the same way. Okay, we're going to break for 10 minutes. I'm going to feed the panelists, and we're going to come right back.
10 minutes.
Nope. 10 minutes? 15. Oh, we're going to chew the food. Okay. All right. I'm looking down at my notes because I made notes because I was going to be talking in front of these lovely ladies.
This conference is being recorded.
And they appreciate being organized, so I made sure I had some notes. We left off at a crucial element where we talked about diversity in the workplace, as well as dealing with your own ethnicity in the workplace, okay? And what I wanted to do was to stay there for a second, but to also move forward from there. So we've identified this as an issue, a possible issue, yeah? What do we do to help diversify the corporate world, or the people that work for you, the people that you want to attract to your business, okay? What do we do with that?
Okay, so I can start. One of the things that I do is I take all of the stigma and I don't amplify it. I don't amplify any racism or any kind of anything that would segregate people from participating. And I try to give that platform for any and everyone to have an equal chance to come. And I don't post anything on my social media that's contrary to that. I don't engage in any kind of political conflict, because everything that I try to do is always talking about being holistic and trying to bring people together as a whole, as an actual human race. And so I always use the term breaking the barrier, because that's what we're doing. You know, if we can have one person or 10 people or 20 people promote the same thing, as far as not talking about how you're different from me in every way, then it's starting to become a ripple effect, because over the last 3 years, I've noticed that there is a change in our mindset of being, you know, of seeing how we are in a diversified way. And it's not so like, you know, you're black, you're white, whatever. It's more of, we are diverse in terms of skill and knowledge and talent. And so we're kind of coming together as a team or community to promote that, so that our younger generation can start seeing that now. And so that's the uphill battle that I'm continuously putting out there every chance I get.
Well, for me as an IT recruiter, one of the biggest things that I see is lack of diversity, especially with women of color within IT. I think I interviewed mostly white men in IT, and I would say probably in the last 3 years I might have talked to 5 African American women. 5. It's just, so for me, what I try to do, I try to within the youth. Whenever I see someone who's college bound, or someone that's in high school and they're trying to figure out what they want to do, I try to encourage them to get into IT, because we don't. It's not enough of us within that industry. So I think that's the biggest thing for me. I can't really be one-sided when I'm interviewing people, but what I can do outside of my own personal life is to encourage our young African American men and women to get into the industry.
I think I'm lucky because since I'm in a creative field, I lead with blackness. I'm a black woman. I lead.
Oh, can I just steal that? I'm gonna steal that.
So,
I lead with blackness.
So I lead with it, and if you don't want to accept that part of me, then I don't want you as a reader, as a buyer. I mean, I do a lot of Facebook marketing, and I purposely, because you can drill down, I exclude my marketing efforts to people that are politically very conservative. There's a marker, and I because I don't want to hear what I've heard before on Twitter. Someone goes, well, if I had a magazine and it was called White Girl Magic, everybody would be mad at me. And I said, you can make whatever you want. I said, Cosmo is White Girl Magic. Marie Claire is White Girl Magic. Allure is White Girl Magic. They just don't say it on there. I said, so you know, so you can make whatever you want. And I said, but you sound dumb, because in my first issue, one of the writers, it's a white female that's writing the story. You have to have a black female character for your story to be in my magazine, but you don't have to be a black female.
You don't have to be a black female writer.
Right.
Yeah.
But we're gonna write from that lens, because that lens has been overlooked.
Yes.
So if you can get on board, you can be on the train with me. And like I said before, I go to conventions where I may be 1%, you know, there, especially when you add in I'm a black female. I didn't even think about the female aspect there. I was one of only 4 black females there.
Yeah.
So
it gets even lower when you talk about science fiction.
Right, exactly. So I lead with it, and it's done well for me, because there are more diversity initiatives, and because I'm leading with that, I'm getting more opportunities now, because people want to hear a different viewpoint.
Right. But I did want to say something real quick about women in technology specifically, because for me, in my experience, it was very difficult being a female in the IT space because either I was the only black female or I was the only black person, or I was either both, and it was either a company. It didn't matter because I've had so many positions. Even when I was a temporary, I was always the only black person that had any kind of knowledge of system administration, land administration, or even being an IT administrator. And it was always that up against my white counterpart. And even then, there weren't that many white female IT people either. So because technology is the main thing that has driven driven everything from cars to phones to TV, it is really important, whether you're female or male, to really understand what that technology is and how you can leverage it, because everything is pretty much done just on your phone. Everything from doing graphics to videos, everything. And if you're not really understanding how this phone operates, we are at a disadvantage, and we will never be in a position to create things like this.
Okay.
We are really good inventors. History has already proven that we have invented so many things. But I think, from my view, that we're losing that. Our children are so fascinated of playing with it as opposed to learning it, and it's a huge difference between the two. And I want to see more of our people create applications and programs and new technology in terms of phones, and really leverage that to bring us higher in the STEM era.
Get their kids in coding classes.
Yes, absolutely.
So there's to both of those points, there's a bullet that I put up here under obstacles. You don't have to turn around, I'll read it to you. It says, the same things that impact women on a whole affect black women 7 times more.
Yes.
Okay, and you can multiply that exponentially when we talk about technology. And on the creative side, we're seeing a big change, and I've wondered why it took so long. When you study the physiology of women, okay, they see in color, they see vivid colors. They see more colors than men do. So why would you not have them being creative and bringing these visual things to you on the screen, on the small screen, in your marketing, in promotions? Why wouldn't you have a woman there or women there involved in this? So for me, it's like, it's an obvious thing that you should be able to add to fix, but that's not just the solution. Just adding more women, is that the solution?
I was going to say, I think the solution starts at a young age in education. I know they did a study about girls at a certain point, they stop raising their hands in science classes.
Right.
And whether it's because teachers stop picking them and then they start losing their confidence. If I keep raising my hand and the teacher's overlooking me, then why do I keep raising my hand? And then that's been an argument for single-sex education, because then, you can't overlook the women in there. And also some of the stereotypes that they have. I remember in the 80s they had this Barbie, and one of the first talking Barbies, and one of the phrases was, "Math is hard."
Yeah, there you go.
And I mean, like I said, I used to be a financial analyst. Math is not hard for me, but if I heard that at a young age,
you would think so.
I would think, okay, for girls, math is hard. Even if I thought, they've done studies where even when girls are excelling, they feel like the boys in the classroom are doing it better than them. And that's usually because the boys are more outspoken than them. Girls will second guess their answers and not raise their hand and say, I know the answer, because of, I want to say, still the cultural ideals of what femininity and womanhood is, and math and science are not thought of as fields for women.
Yet, they still rise. And the history says that that's one of those things that women excel in. And I get the need, and I see that. And as a father of daughters, I see it. So for me, it's most importantly to give them that kick, that push, that inspiration, and say, you can do all of these things if you set your mind and heart to it. Yeah. staying on that thread, what are the best careers or the best avenues for success in running your own business? What do you see that in the next 5 years? What do you see that as a creative?
As a creative, I would say moving, kind of like she said, moving onto mobile platforms. I met a woman at the conference, a black female woman. She works for this company called Zombie Run. They're based in London. They are a game, a zombie running game. She writes the stories for that game.
Oh.
And that's something that, I mean, when I was in high school, I wouldn't have thought that was a career path to take.
Somebody has to do it.
Right, so somebody has to do it, but, you know, I mean, the Atari games, they didn't have stories with them, you know, like, so, you know, a lot of things have changed, so I think that looking at what we have at the present and kind of extrapolating what you think is going to happen in the future, VR is going to be bigger in the future.
Way bigger.
So people are going to want immersive stories. People are going to want immersive stories that branch out. So being able to storytell and do that door A, B, C, D, and E, and not just being able to tell a linear story, but being able to tell a multilinear story. I think that's really important in the creative sphere. And then the fact that, I mean, things are moving online and faster than ever. Audiobooks are going to be they're kind of big right now, but they're going to be bigger. Because now we have AI and that, like Google Home and Alexa, where you have a friendlier voice telling it. So it's going to be cheaper and easier for authors to do audiobooks. Right now you have to hire a voice actor.
Correct.
You have to get studio time. Well, Amazon's going to perfect Alexa to where it's going to sound like you're talking to another human. So then that's going to make it easy for me to just feed the text to it, and then I've got my audiobook done. My overhead costs are gone or minimal now.
Yep.
So we have to think about what's going on right now and just look into the future. That's why speculative fiction is important. You're looking into the future.
Yes.
Well, I think that people in general, when they get an idea, they need to run with it. Don't think it's a dumb idea. And just go for it. Because if you thought of it, 10 more people have thought of it. But it's the person that gets out the starting gate is the one that's going to be successful. So apps is really big. Touch base on technology. I mean, create an app. You could, you know, be in a store, all of a sudden the light bulb goes out. Oh my God, if that was an app, it would be great. Well, go for it, you know? So.
I think they pretty much said all of that, but outside of that, I guess for me, I'm in a unique position where I am hearing so many different people tell me about how they are reinventing themselves and taking what's existing and putting a twist on that one piece, whether it be an activity in person or an application. They're just basically taking that technology and they're actually now going global. And so in the last couple of years, I would say maybe 2 years, a lot more people are doing things on a global scale as opposed to just doing something in their community because they're not getting that far. So what they're doing is that they are creating podcasts and they're creating tours, as you see on social media, where they say they're going to be in like 5 cities. They're literally stretching their arms out and not being afraid to reach to someone in California and say, let's do an event and call it a tour. In our community, that's a very small thing, but if you kind of look at the branding, what they put behind it, it looks like a really big thing. And I think in the next 5 years that those type of activities is going to be so huge that a lot more people are going to be doing it, and that overhead of travel, doing things through Skype and all these new video conferencing. I mean, even Facebook is now starting to allow you to Facebook Live with 2 people with your phone as opposed to paying for a third-party application. So more technology like that as we can continue to demand that instant gratification of wanting to to talk to someone, communicate, it's going to just get bigger and bigger. And I was speaking to someone yesterday who she raises a mogul. He's out there, he's 10 years old, from Germany, he travels all over overseas and the US speaking about how he is going to be the next Les Brown, or he's going to have all football rings, the NFL football rings. This is what his goals are, and he inspires other young people, 10 years old, 12 years old, to reinvent themselves and create these things and not be afraid. And to your point earlier, as far as like wise women, you know, why are we so stuck? In my view, what I see on my side is that we do a lot of women's empowerment to lift us up, but we don't really act on that. We kind of just say, here's how you empower yourself, and then we walk off. But at the same time, we don't have the how. And then to her point about not being able to raise your hand because you're being overlooked, a lot of that just comes from generations of just saying that you are a woman and you are weak. And what you're saying might be great, and yes, you might have the confidence to speak, but you're not a man. So for me, it was more of, if I'm speaking in a confident way, then I'm aggressive. But if you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, but you
have to watch that.
Right.
Though.
So what happened to us over time was that we would have all these great ideas, but we were afraid to like act on them because we were told we are weak because we are a woman, and whatever that meant to that person at the time. But more women are starting now to make that shift to say, I got to get out of that. And I'm going to start acting on what I want to do as far as my business. I'm going to have my 9 to 5, and I'm going to have my side grind business too.
So there's a commercial, and I thought it was apropos. The commercial has this woman, and she just starts off at this company, and she's working as an executive assistant for this either a lawyer or some kind of businessman, and she's trying to get him to sign some paperwork, and he's always too busy. He's running here, he's running there. She's like, going back and forth, and finally she sits down and goes, wait a minute. Next thing you know, she's working from home by a lake, and she's running her own company. Okay, so knowing is the first step, knowing that this may not be right for me, you know, and then having the courage to boldly step out there and boom, go claim it. Once you put it out there in the universe, you claim it. So my thing is looking forward. Okay, you panel, you're the 3 magi. So this panel, looking forward, and you look to your right and you look to the rear, and you see these women of color. What advice can you give them going forward that they could take out of here today and say, boom, I can bank on that?
Believe in yourself. I think that's the key. You have to believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, nobody else will.
And I would say, think about what you do well, how it serves others, and how you can put it out there. Now with technology, there's so many things you can do. I know people that have started up virtual assistant businesses because they've been admins their whole life.
Yep.
Well, now you can be an admin, like you said, by a pool, because you can do everything online. I think that's a really big thing. And going back to some of the basics and adding that technological twist to it, there's a woman, her name is Mimi G. She sews really, really well. She had a sewing blog. Well, then she started videotaping the sewing segments of her sewing. That's how I learned how to sew from her. Well, she's now a 6-figure business owner by video sewing tutorials.
There you go.
So think about what you do well.
Yes.
What people need to know. I mean, there are things that people used to just know. Your grandmother taught you, or someone else taught you. That now we're missing that.
Yeah.
We're missing that. So if you can fill in that gap for people, then you can make money off of it.
Pretty much.
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing I would say is my number 1 practice, which I have in my book too, is give yourself permission to do what you love to do to be happy. And this really just needs...
And not feel bad about doing it.
And not feel bad. Don't just be totally unapologetic, because it is your talent, it is your life, it is your responsibility to make yourself happy and to empower yourself to do what you want to do. Also believing in yourself and things of that nature, but just knowing that you're going to fail at some point, but don't let that stop you from proceeding forward. Just figure out what you need to fix, and then fix it, and then keep going.
Okay, so stop right there. Rejection.
Yes.
Yes.
You're gonna have
rejection, no, but rejection, yes.
Yeah, you're gonna have tons of. There's so many people. I have people now still telling me no. But then when you get that yes, it is the greatest feeling. And that's what you want to fuel your next adventure, your next journey. You know, you're going to have people that you know and love that's never going to support what you do. They're never going to believe in what you do. They're not going to take the effort that you're going to take to do what you have to do. But you can't let that stop you. You have to continue on with your plan, and then just look at your business plan, revise, readjust, do the whole formula, find out what that niche is, and do it well.
Rejection, Ms. Sharon.
Well, being a recruiter, really the only rejection that I received is from candidates. So I can't really, what they do is a little bit different from what I do. So I really can't elaborate more. So that's really the only rejection that I receive is from candidates that, you know, they're not interested for whatever reason. Yeah.
I would say there's a billion people in the world, so one no should not slow you down, because there's usually another yes around the corner. Also, sometimes that's a no but, which is a great thing. No, but maybe if you did X, Y, and Z, and you have a chance to grow if someone's giving you that feedback of why they're rejecting you in the first place. Sometimes you won't get it, but if you do, it's really valuable. It's really valuable.
And how you acknowledge and accept the rejection is worth, I think, is worth more than a yes in some regards, because if I listened to all the people that told me no, I'd still be in East Elmhurst, New York City, sitting on the stoop.
Well, with my candidates, if they say no, what I do is I build a relationship with them over a course of X amount of years. So that way they're comfortable with me. So when they do need me, or they do need a new job, they're gonna come to me. So that's how I get over it.
There you go, and there you go. All right, so I'm at AT&T. Let me preface this. I love AT&T.
Drink the Kool-Aid.
I did it a long time ago. So I'm at AT&T, and I can't go up. There's no room. Okay, the lateral possibilities are everything I don't want to do. Right. And I'm not going to take less money to do more. Okay, so at this juncture, at this stage, am I a candidate for my own company?
Your own business.
My own business.
I would say that while you are working, and I think this is my Bible, you should always be strategizing what your career path is, no matter where you are and how long you've been on the job. For my own personal experience, because I kept hitting that glass ceiling, like after a year of being on the job, I was always looking online to see where my industry was going, how many women were in it, how much, what is the salary expectation, going out to the Department of Labor and looking at the statistics of the unemployment rate, should I decide to leave my job or try to do another venture,
bad time now.
Or, and what that done for me was that it gave me the advantage to be able to choose whether I want to stay where I am, or do I have the ability to make another move, either lateral or get in another position, making more money. But because I was in that unique position, I always felt like I just had to know what my next step was.
We all do. We all want to know that.
But it's different when we're sitting back and we're saying, yeah, I know I want to be this later, but are you actually putting in the work and saying, I know that if I look on Indeed.com, I can find 10 positions. Do I even fit one of them? And that's a difference, because a title doesn't really mean anything. It's really the job description. Do you really match the job description based on how many years you've been doing this one thing? And you'll be surprised, because I know people who have been on a job 2, 3, 5, 10, and 20, and they are outdated by a year or 2 years. And then they've realized that they can't find another job, they can't make the next hop, because they didn't put the work in to find that one skill or to get that one piece of education or to talk to someone. And that's another thing I was gonna say is don't be afraid to ask questions, because if you don't ask a question, if you don't tap that next person that has the skill you need, you're not going to be able to integrate that into your.
Is that where that mentorship
Yes.
comes through? Yeah.
Yes, don't be afraid to be mentored. It's not saying that you're stupid, that you're less educated. It just means that you are opening yourself up for more education so you can figure out what you want to do with that education. If you are working and you've been in this job for 5 years, what is that next skill outside of what you've been doing for 5 years that if you lose your job, is your skill in demand? That's the question. You know, can somebody quickly pick you up in 3 weeks? For my experience, and I speak for myself, I've actually lost jobs. I actually was laid off, but I always had a job in 3 weeks. Versus people who I've known have been unemployed for 6 months or to a year.
Yes.
So it makes a huge difference when you just take a Saturday, take 2 hours and say, okay, I picked up these skills and I want to do this. What has changed in the market? What has changed in the industry? Is it going up or down? That's when you want to go to the Department of Bureau of Labor and Statistics. Is your industry being, eliminated?
Yeah.
Those are the things that we all need to do to make sure that we don't end up long-term unemployment.
Now, as a creative, and I talked about this, but you did this. So you made this happen. You realized something and said, you know what? I can do this. I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to do it. Now, realizing that, it must have been a daunting task to say, I'm going to launch my own magazine and be the publisher of this magazine. Did you lean on a knowledge resource, a mentor, or someone else that was already doing it?
No, because I'm crazy. No.
Oh man!
I like to call myself a Jane of all trades, master of some. So a lot of those skills I've learned on different jobs. Like I said, I was in the government before. I've always had an interest in technology. That's why it's really cool listening to them talk, because my dad always said, he made me take computer classes from high school to college. My major was English. I said, Daddy, I'm never going to graduate if you keep making me take these classes and aren't in my major.
Daddy, I'll pay for it.
Right, but he knew where society was going,
yes.
And he wanted me to know that. So I learned HTML really young. So all my websites I do myself.
There you go.
I publish myself, the ebooks, all of that. There's software that formats my books beautifully. I learned the software. So even when the book sales slow down a little bit, on the side I format books for other people.
There you go.
So I'm always have one skill set to back me up if the other one's lagging a little bit, and I think that's an easy way for people to make that jump from the 9 to 5 to making their passion or their talent their day job. Is you can ease into it. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. Before I gave my husband the spreadsheet that said we can live off of your salary, I was doing little things to set myself up for making
Success.
that leap.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Sharon?
Very similar. I also do voiceover work.
Yeah.
Build websites. But I wanted to touch base on, again, within IT. One of the things that I've noticed has become a trend that a lot of people in IT, like as yourself, they get tired of doing the same old, and working for other people. So a lot of these consulting companies that have popped up in the area, they're owned by people in IT. They said, look, why should I work for you when I can open my own company and get a couple contracts and hire my own people and then build myself up? So how do you go to the next level? Be a business owner and get a couple government contracts and have your own billable employees. Majority of the small consulting companies are all owned by IT people.
You taking notes, Mike?
Absolutely.
I'm trying to do this,
Absolutely.
man.
Absolutely.
And be virtual. Don't spend a whole bunch of money in brick and mortar. You don't need that anymore.
As three entrepreneurs.
Okay.
I'm gonna take away women, but I'm gonna leave with your blackness. So it's 3 black entrepreneurs. Okay. How do you feel about your exposure?
Oh, wow. I would say.
I mean, in the sense, I don't mean in the other sense. I mean your exposure
For business?
for business.
I am so happy that I do what I do. Just piggybacking on what all of us have said, for me, I have used my knowledge of technology to bring exposure to myself first.
There you go.
To take a platform or create a way so that I have, just like these ladies here, I've learned the software on how to brand myself, on how to do video imagery, on how to do my own website, how to also take my skill and promote others. And because of that, it has afforded me to be able to experience and meet people and be at places just like this event to just not only share, but sometimes I just sit back and I just learn from so many amazing people.
Mm-hmm.
If it wasn't for me doing that, I probably would still be sitting in that office managing IT staff or doing system engineering work or something like that and wondering how would it be. So having that and also having my business makes me feel very complete, that I have a holistic, view of my life. And being an entrepreneur is the greatest thing that I think that I have done for myself, because now I have something I can leave to my kids. I have something for my grandkids. I have a legacy that now in history, coming from somebody who was, grew up in DC, was bullied, was singing, lost her voice, ended up doing a podcast and ended up meeting 200 or 300 people. It has been phenomenal, and I would advise anyone who has a dream to do something like that, that don't let a 9-to-5 job stop you from doing that, to find a way to make it happen with the resources that you have and really build upon that. And really relationships, partnerships is the key, networking is the key, and communication is definitely the key.
Sharon?
Well, she said it all.
Okay.
but I use my strength of relationship management to get myself out there. And that's why I have 30,000 people that follow me online.
Okay.
I'm not following them. So relationship management for me was key. And that's kind of how I've built my brand and got myself out there. And I've been at events and my name pops up. Oh my God, you're Sharon Downing. Just because of the exposure that I've had. But it was what I did. It was my legwork, getting myself on LinkedIn, getting myself out on Facebook, getting myself out on Twitter. So that's what worked for me.
I would say, I think that I've been given a platform starting my own business. I've been asked to speak at different things. I've been a panelist for different things. I've been on like 5 different podcasts now, and it's also led me in directions that I didn't necessarily expect, because people are watching you online whether you know it or not. And so I got connected with someone who said, I've been watching you online for about 6 months.
Was that creepy?
It is.
He said it nicer, so it didn't sound too creepy. But that led me to being on his podcast. He's a producer in LA, and that led me to writing a script for him, and I'm getting a script produced this year.
Oh, I didn't tell anybody about that, but
So
shine on.
So it's, and I didn't know he was watching me. I try to make connections in the different arenas that I want to play in, but also kind of like I forgot which one of the ladies said it, but also knowing how you're presenting yourself online. Like, I do lead with blackness, I am political online, but you know that from jump. So when we work together, there won't be any surprise.
Ain't no surprise. Ain't no surprise. And to that, it's interesting you would say that, because I would have never met this person who shall not be named. I would have never met him had he not been friended to me on Facebook and talked back and forth over the years. And then all of a sudden, out of the nowhere, said, hey, I read your book, let's make a movie. Who the hell is this? And you're like, okay, whatever. But, long story short, we're doing things. And that's only because, people watch you, they see you, and I always say, be you, okay? You can filter how you be you, but be you, in essence, in the core. And that is going to attract what you put out. So don't really even trip about that. Okay, so, do you ladies have any questions? Anybody have any questions?
I don't have any questions because they've answered so much, but I just want to say thank you for all of this information and feedback. I just everything you guys were saying was just so on point, and it's something that being a woman in technology we face every day. And I'm trying to grow my career, move up the corporate ladder, and then eventually find my own passions and move away from working for someone. So it sat well with me, and I appreciate all of it. So thank you. You're welcome. Thank you.
No, I'm sorry.
The thing that I saw was that it applied to actually all of our experiences. So if you stripped away the color and the gender, it seemed like there was this, even though you're coming from different angles, you were always on point across, and and supporting each other and what each other is saying. But I'm listening because I have ideas of what I want to do, and I'm in genealogy, and you were talking about how you would come up with something that you're providing service for somebody else. And I'm in a weird situation where I have a very unique career path. I've been the only of my kind for a long time.
I feel like that.
And I didn't even think about it. For 12 years, I was the only African American woman working for a lineage society doing what I did. I'm the first of the Smithsonian doing what I do. One thing that you all made me realize was that I haven't been valuing the significance of it. I can tell you that's what I do, but in terms of the impact of it and looking at ways of bringing others into it, that's the part that I'm hearing from you in terms of I'm living it and I'm turning that around to helping others immediately. It sounds as if you're doing that.
Yeah, because when you're an entrepreneur, they always tell you that you should always look for a problem that person has, and if there is a need. So if what you're saying, you have, I don't know how many years of this skill, but then there's so many of us that can't afford to go on, Ancestry.com and pay the cost, but you could provide an avenue of service that is affordable for someone, and that is creating a valuable need to a community, and that's how entrepreneurs really start. It's not so much about selling, it's about how you're giving, and then you're getting in return, money will come, clients will come, relationships will come. So like the old saying, if you build it, they will build it, serve it, they will come, Yeah.
Amazon,
Amazon.
He didn't make any money for about 5 or 7 years.
Yeah, there's this picture.
Now he on the world,
Hey, James, I have
you
a
can actually
question.
you can write a whole book.
Your advice was kind of like I could apply it.
You can
in
buy
any
a
direction.
how-to, you can actually just write a how-to.
A journal.
How do you actually?
Mike, you had a question?
Yeah, it's kind of, I think, echoes what you just said, right? So in summary, really what you said is, you know what, I really just understood that I have value.
Yes.
Right, that my life's experiences up to this point is valuable. It has impact, right? And so, because when you look at, who you serve, right, there's two things in my mind, right, that in terms of meeting a need, it's either people don't know, and so you're bringing your knowledge to them, right? People don't really know, how do I find, my roots, if you will, right? Or, in the areas of, technology, or they don't have time. Right? For those of us who are the DIYers or versus, I know how to change my oil, but it's just faster and cheaper if I just go to Jiffy Lube or let somebody else do it for me, right? So I think those are the two areas, that are definitely applicable. But I did have a question for you ladies, and that is this, right? So I know, your wife, mom, so you have, other than running your business, how do you manage your business? Right, and get it to to grow and go to that next level, right? But at the same time, manage your day to day, right? So how do you kind of keep one eye on doing what you got to do, but then looking forward in terms of what's next, and balance time, and balance also time for yourselves,
Okay,
So-
so that might be a question just for Kanisha, because she's got them young ones.
Well,
Me and James, we were talking about journals and planners, and so planning your day,
Okay.
being really intentional about your day.
Yeah.
We waste a lot of time and we don't realize it unless we track it.
Yeah.
There was some app that I had on my phone that tracked like how much time I spent on social media. You know, and it was like disgusting after a while, because if it's not for my business, then I'm kind of wasting time. But also building in that wasting your time, so you don't feel constricted by like this really rigid schedule. So I have on my thing like, okay, get the kids ready for school. My youngest stays home with me, so I have to, you know, monopolize him at different times. But I also have in like Facebook time.
Ooh.
I have that.
Let me write that down.
Facebook time, so he knows I have Facebook time.
Okay.
I always see you on Facebook.
He knows I have Facebook time. And then it'll have writing times, but also recognizing when you are at your best. Like I tried to do we'll wake up earlier before the kids wake up and do the stuff. I'm crap in the morning. Like I can't think straight. I need coffee, and then I can't do it. I'm really good late at night, and I had to figure that out. So a lot of my work I'll do after everyone's sleeping. So I had to figure that out about myself, because a lot of the books will tell you wake up, an hour earlier and get your day started. Well,
Right.
no, I'm tired. I can't do it. But I figured out at night I'm really productive.
Okay.
So during the day I try to do the things that don't need a lot of brain power, things you can put on like automatic pilot.
Yeah.
And then the things that I really need to think about, I do that when I'm at my best.
Got you.
Well,
Don't call it like that.
well, no, my children are grown, so
Okay.
it's just me.
Mhm.
And I wake up every morning and just hit the ground running. So there's really, there's really nothing complex about it.
Yeah.
Except when the grandbabies come over.
Well, do you plan your dates? I know you're, as a consultant, right?
I do, because sometimes I'm dealing with candidates that are like in Hawaii, then of course I have to adjust my schedule, because I don't want to call them at 9 o'clock in the morning, and it's 3 o'clock their time or whatever.
Yeah.
So, yes, I do. I adjust my schedule according to the candidates that I'm working with. Yeah. But I also try to break up my day. 4 hours here and then 4 hours later.
So, as a follow-up, so do you guys outsource? I know you mentioned before about learning different tools and technologies, right? Whether it be for branding or for building your own website. But have you come to a point, right, where you're like, you know what? I just don't have the time, so let me outsource this?
Yes.
Or, okay.
I have 4 employees in India.
Okay.
I have 1 in Jamaica, and I have 1 in the Philippines.
And speaking to that, I use Fiverr a lot for different things, and
Okay.
I make sure that I get people in other countries, because usually their prices are cheaper because their cost of living is lower.
Yeah.
For some of my book covers, if I know that I can't do it, it's not a simple image, I will hire that out.
Okay.
Editing sometimes if I don't have time, because people think about how much it's going to cost them in dollars, but they don't think about the time cost of doing all of that.
Yes.
And I'm like, I could have just hired somebody that would have been done in an hour, and I'm working on this cover for 5 hours. It's dumb. I just wasted all this time. I could have been doing something like that I am good at. I think I'm pretty good at marketing, so I do my own marketing.
Very good at marketing.
So.
Nice.
Very good.
I don't want to sit and make 100 phone calls to a candidate, so I outsource that to my virtual assistant that's in the Philippines. It's cheaper for me to pay her $5 an hour than for me to sit and do it.
Sure.
So while she's making the call, while she's either emailing, I'm either calling and she's emailing, or she's emailing and I'm calling, and we're
Gotcha.
getting the job done
Yes.
a lot faster.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, I think for me, I don't have staff. My son's.
I was gonna say, you got sons.
But you know what? Even though my kids are finally grown, they're still, kids. They still have attention, and for me to manage, I do my 9 to 5, and I come home and I'm instantly in entrepreneur mode. So I always tend to find time in between. And because I have a really strong support system, they pretty much support what I do. They allow me the time. And this kind of went all the way back when I was in graduate school, just trying to get my degree, and they was younger then, and they didn't really understand, why is mom at work and then she's not spending time with me. I had to actually find the time to say, okay, these days I'm going to study, or these days I'm going to do business, and then these few days is family time. It's my time to rest, not to do anything. One of the most important things that helped me manage my time is knowing what to give up. When to let something go. Number one was getting rid of my cable television, because that was a huge time waster. I could sit there and watch DIY Network, HGTV, and next thing you know, I got a hammer and some nails. Right? And next thing you know, it's 4 o'clock and I haven't done anything. And the second thing was, social media is also a big time waster, but what I've learned a couple years ago was I had to be smart in how I use social media to spend my time. So instead of using it for personal, I literally took 3 weeks and deleted everything personal on my Facebook group, and decided that if I'm going to be on Facebook or social media, it's going to be to help promote my business, to help me make further connections. So then it made sense for me to say, I'm going to spend 2 hours on Facebook or an hour reaching out to people who are in my network and trying to collaborate to do stuff. So instead of me sitting there and scrolling, now I do have my moments where I'm scrolling looking at videos on my rest day, but for the most part, Monday through Friday, it's always about how can I give you information that will help your business to be better? What can I offer you, or who can I turn you on to that's going to help you financially or with your business, with anything? And I spend that time, and then when I come home on certain days, it is me and my family, or it's me and my husband, or me and my granddaughter, who always wants my attention. And I even gave her a little bit of a video time, Marina's time, where she gets to sit with me and do her little video with me. And so we have those moments where, you have your personal time, because if you try to do everything, you can't. And I wish that I could have like staff and I can outsource, but sometimes as a solopreneur or entrepreneur, you don't have the finances to do that. So this is why learning the technology, knowing how to manage your business is very critical, because you want your overhead to be as low as humanly possible, so that you can manage it all and just know what your limitations are.
I have a question regarding social media and networking.
Yes.
And how do you manage it, like some of the venues you're talking about having followers of Facebook? How about LinkedIn, and you're getting people who are reaching out to you and you have no clue? Do you have a formula for accepting, rejecting, or what's your process? Or do you have one?
I'm an open networker. Actually, I'm considered a lion, a LinkedIn lion, because I think I have 9,000 contacts. So I don't turn anyone away, because I never know when I'm going to need that person.
Right. I'm sort of the same way too. I am sort of open. Most of my formula is coming out to events like this to meet people. And through meeting people like yourselves, I end up learning who is in your network that can work with me. And it's like a triple effect. It's just like down. Now, I don't have like as many followers as hers, because for me, I want my followers to lead to something that is going to help my business and help their business. I'm very particular, as opposed to letting just any and everybody, because I have people who connect with me and they actually said no word to me that's it's not saying they're not valuable, but they're not useful either. So what I try to do is build useful people on like LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter, so that the next person who is connecting with me knows that I have connections with somebody who is valuable to
influencers.
them. Influencers, and that's how I kind of build mine. And if I have people who connect to me and don't say a word, but what I usually do is I will ask them the reason. Thank you for the connection, but how do you know me? How can I help you? If they don't answer, sometimes depending on their profile and what they post, I am very particular too. I don't want somebody posting derogatory stuff. So I will look at your profile and see if there's anything that aligns with what my brand says, because I really believe that if for entrepreneurial business, if you're going for a career, they will Google you. They will look at your profile. They will judge you based on who is following you or who's posting stuff on your feed. So I'm very look at my brand very, very carefully for that.
I have a personal Facebook. I have a business Facebook page as myself and as Black Girl Magic Literary Magazine.
Same here.
That kind of weeds some people out because I'm a personality. a lot of people friend me on my personal page. So I do have a lot of friends on my personal page that are business contacts, but we do have friendships. We talk all the time. We are able to exchange information. So I have both, and same with Twitter. I have a professional Twitter and I have a myself Twitter, but they're both open. They're both open because some opportunities I would never get if I was closed off.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know who they are, because some people don't want you to know who they are at first, because
Correct.
you can try and take advantage of them or of your relationship. So some people are feeling you out for a while, and if it was closed off, they wouldn't have that chance to feel me out, and vice versa. I can see on someone's feed whether there's someone that I'd ever want to, be in communication or in business with as well. So I keep it open pretty much. On my personal one, I've been a little more judicious. So you either have to be related to me, an actual friend sometime in my lifetime, or you have to be in the same industry as me.
There you go.
Yeah, and another thing I would probably add too is just being careful of the people who is making your entrepreneurship journey difficult. And sometimes that means, again, going back to what you have to let go, sometimes you have to block certain people to protect your brand and your entrepreneurship, because they can get on there, they can report you, causing your Facebook or your Twitter to go down, or they could be posting something to your friends without your knowledge that can also ruin your reputation. So just being very cautious, and really just don't be afraid to ask the questions. Who are you? And why do you want to connect with me? What, do we want to work together? Do you want information? Did you see a post?
Do I owe you money?
Try to figure that out. So I asked the question. And believe it or not, people are more receptive if they really have good intentions to connect with you, because they really want to connect with you. They will actually write back, and then you will make that. And that's how you start the relationship, because a lot of times we have all these people and we have no idea who they are, but are they really building a relationship with you or your brand, or either one? So, how is that going to be useful for you in your business? Because they're on Facebook, you have no email, you have no contact, there's no way for you to really market to them, because the algorithm is set for you to only see your most active participants.
Yes.
So if you're not able to build a relationship with someone that you think is going to help you in the future, they're never going to see your posts, you're never going to be able to reach out to them in any way.
Tyrone? So I had said before that I was listening for how this can help my daughter. She just launched a business selling skincare products, which I'm learning is very competitive.
Very.
So I know that's not your field, but just in terms of marketing your business, what would you have her think about in terms of differentiating her product in the market outside of the quality?
Well, one of the things that I would probably recommend that she do is figure out what she likes in the beauty product and figure out how she can stand out, and then build a web page and build her own brand, her own product. Because a lot of times I've seen vendors come out who have taken other products and actually mixed up their own shea butter, or they mix up their own soaps, or they created their own lipsticks or however, and maybe that's something that she can look into on how she can develop her own beauty products, and then actually learn how to come up with a logo, a name. You can go to Network Solutions and get a website for like $15 a month, and you can have a blog that you could turn into anything.
Tailor-made.
And it will come with domain email. It will come with the domain actually itself for just $15 a month. It's very cheap, and she can actually do that and actually promote it. Go out to really go to events where they market beauty products, and actually go to trade shows, and actually market herself as a business, get her signed up and everything, because that's the only way she's going to be able to stand out, and she'll be out from under like Mary Kay or whoever it is. She doesn't have to worry about that. It'll be her brand, her reputation.
My daughter just recently started an e-commerce business for sugar wax. She makes it at home. It's all organic. She's got her little tubs. She's got a logo. She's setting up her website. She's gonna be launching it on Amazon. So it's not about always selling someone else's products, but creating your own.
So like that young man that's sitting back there looking at the phone, he has a capability to draw animation and do video editing. And just sitting at home, he has built his mini business, Boopy Tunes Entertainment, where he makes money on YouTube. I don't have to buy him clothes or shoes or food, and you can see he eats very well, because he literally has taken that idea that I taught him of just taking the talent that you have. It may not be the greatest thing. He's not the greatest artist in the world, but he created an he actually took an existing cartoon that's famous out there and did a parody of it. Got a couple of his friends to do voiceovers, and now they do videos, and they have more than 10,000 followers. Wow. Making money on YouTube. So it's little stuff like that that can turn things around, and before you know it, she might be a mainstream new product that people are doing, because on YouTube alone, selling products on YouTube is $1 billion business. Just having someone go there and put on some makeup and they have followers galore buying their stuff. So I would say, have a try it.
Kanisha.
I just shuttered a business the beginning of this year, but it was running all last year. It was a subscription service for beard products.
Beard.
Okay.
Yes.
So I found a niche, very, everybody's into beards nowadays. And it, in the first year, and this was being an unknown company, I made $10,000 the first year. I was just doing it because I wanted some extra money. I wanted some extra money, and I was trying to get my husband to grow a beard, right? So I put those two things together. So I got my domain name. I had a website for my back end. I used Cratejoy, which is specifically for subscription services. So that was the back end. Shopify is a great e-commerce platform to use. Really easy to use. They have free templates, and then they have like more advanced templates that are run you about $150. Marketing is the most important part. Yes. Because, like I said, I was unknown, but I was getting my product out to people. I had a customer in Australia. As a first year unknown business, the skincare business is a hard to get into business, but I had a distinctive logo, a distinctive name. My name was Beard Guy Box, so it was for beard guys. Yeah. I did it anonymously too, because you want to be known for one thing sometimes. Right. I'm a writer, so I want people to know me as a writer.
Black girl lit, selling beard stuff.
Right. So I did it. I was able to do it basically anonymously. Had a Facebook page for it. Ran a lot of Facebook ads. I want to say last year I ran about $1,000 in Facebook ads. Drilled down to, I had a ideal customer, so make sure she has in her mind who her ideal customer is, because some people think they want to sell to everybody. You don't want to sell to everybody. You want to have an ideal customer that you're selling to. So mine was the modern bearded man. So it wasn't the guy that's chopping wood out. It wasn't that guy. It was the guy in a suit and a tie. It was James. It was
I didn't see none of that.
And so, I also tweaked ads, because I did it based on, once you do one ad, like a wide range, guys 21 to 60, wide range. Then you start seeing who responds to your ads the most. Right. And then I funnel it down, because I want to get my per click cost down. Yeah. So I'm getting your information. I will talk to your daughter.
Fantastic.
Because marketing is the key. There are a million great ideas out there, and sometimes the only reason why some person succeeds and another person fails is the other person is a better marketer.
Better marketer. Right. Yeah. Not a better product, but a better marketer.
So do you use marketing platforms? Oh, I'm sorry.
So I'll get that, and then so my marketing platforms were mainly Facebook ads. So many people are on Facebook. Yeah. It's a captured audience. Facebook has so many insights of how you could narrow down who you want to target. Right.
Ask the Russians.
Yeah, by age, by race, by who's bought online in the last 30 days. So I know you're more likely to be an online buyer. I'm not going to market to you if you just go to Macy's every week. I want the people that are buying online, by income, by education, by what you are interested in. I mean, you can get down to a really granular level of who your ideal customer is. If I wanted guys that read GQ, Men's Health, I was able to go that deep into it, because I knew that with my price range, my lowest price was $19.99, and you were only getting one product.
Yeah, you only have certain people gonna do that.
Exactly, so I knew who needed to buy. It wasn't gonna be college students, because they don't have the money to spend on their beard for that, you know, and I was going after a certain customer. So you also have to think about, what sort of customer are you looking for? Are you looking for a Walmart customer? Well, everybody uses Walmart, but are you looking for a value saver type customer, or are you looking for someone who wants an elite type of experience? And if you are giving them an elite type of experience, everything else has to match it. Also, your website has to match it. Your packaging has to match it. Your logo has to match it, because all that says something about the person who's buying it. If they're sitting their product on their shelf, what it says about them, because they're buying your product over someone else's product.
I wanted to say something real quick about the branding, because I would say in the last couple of years, everybody wants to put their face on everything. And you said something significant about your logo and your brand. Everybody can't put their face on their brand. It's going to be a turnoff. I mean, even I learned that in my first year. I wanted to have my face because that's where everybody was doing, but the message is very important. And I had to learn to say, okay, I need to scale back.
It's your name.
Anne Alston, no, but I had to actually eat that, and I had said, okay, I can't be the actual face in front of it. I have to put Alston Tech in everything that goes with it up front. And sometimes you have to do that. Some people do good with their face in their brand and in their marketing, but a lot of times that's just not going to work. So knowing how your people respond to that is really important.
One more question.
So when you start looking like something like Cratejoy, or you're like on Etsy, or you're like on We Buy Black, from a marketing perspective, how are you, like, how do you find out like the algorithm that's essential to like promote your item? Because you know, Cratejoy has thousands of subscription boxes.
So for Cratejoy, they have thousands. One of the things that I did was find blogs that are specifically for subscription services. So there's like iHeart subscriptions and all these different blogs. So then you say to them, hey, can you feature my product on there? So sometimes you have to send them your product. Sometimes I would give them a discount code, so they would just be in my next, batch of sales, and then they'll review your product. So I had reviews on different blog sites. Subscription Addiction is another website. So that was one way to do it. Like I said, Facebook ads were one of my biggest generators. I haven't stepped into Google ads yet, but I know that there are people that do Google ads. So that's how I got people to go to me. The other thing is, before I decided what I wanted to do and whether that was a good business proposition, was I looked on Cratejoy, and under men's grooming gifts, there were only 1.5 pages. A page and a half. So I knew if someone was looking for men's grooming gifts, they weren't going to have to go through 10 pages of looking at different products. So mine was going to show up high.
Now, talking and speaking to that, that's all about your SEO. So your search engine optimization has to be on point. Because when someone Googles your product, the first thing they want to see on that first page should be your Google results for your product. Period. If they got to go 10 pages, ain't nobody going to do that.
I just wanted, because I'm a numbers person, and you were talking about in Facebook, you were trying to get down your per click.
Yes, your cost per click.
So can you tell me about the cost thing?
Sure.
Like I said, I'm a numbers person.
Sure, no problem. So
she is too.
Yeah. So when you first make your audience, it'll tell you about how big your audience is. A lot of people think they want to go really big. Oh, I want to reach 1 million people. You don't.
No, you don't.
You want to get about 100,000. If you can. Sometimes it's hard. You have to really, really dig down. But the reason why you want to do that is because the more specific you are, the more likely that person is going to be the type of person that's going to click on your ad. So you pay Facebook based on how many clicks you get. So it'll tell you have 10,000 impressions, and that's how many people saw your ad. And then it'll have you got 100 clicks from the 10,000 impressions. So then there's a calculation, I don't know it off the top of my head, that calculates the impressions versus the clicks and what I can't remember is what's the ideal click per impression ratio.
Yeah, and then it's also, you gotta look at your budget for the day.
Yes.
Your daily budget.
Yeah, and that also influences how many people see your ad a day.
Yep.
So I always start off with $3 to $5 a day to see how the ad goes. And then if it's going well, I'll increase my ad spend. If it's a dud, that's when I'll start refining a little bit.
And you know this within a week. You know this within a week, how it's going. So.
Yeah. And like I said, sometimes I'll start drilling down. Like at first I thought for the Beard Guy box, I need to be marketing to men. Well, a lot of women are the ones that buy the products for their man. So then I started adding in women, and then my cost per click went down, because that's what you want. You want a low cost per click. You don't want it to cost you $10 to get one person to click on it when your product is $19 because you're cutting into your profit margin. So I started adding in women, and I get a lot. I got, because I just shuttered it, but I got a lot of people that were doing gift subscriptions.
Yes.
And then you start saying, oh, well, then you can think, oh, that's another new product variant I need to add. So for like Valentine's Day or for Christmas or whatever holiday it is, you do a special box for that one. We did a special Christmas gift box. They got like a little stocking and they got like a little gift and all that stuff.
You're just making me mad because I never saw these ads pop up in my
Well, you know what? I started targeting women more. That's why.
Well, that would be why.
Yeah, I started targeting women more because they would be the ones on the subscription, and then it would say to John Davis or something, but it was from Kristen Davis. So I started to realize men may care about how they look, but sometimes they're not willing to invest it unless they know, like there are men that I've used Irish Spring since I was 12, so I'm using Irish Spring, but if their wife or their girlfriend introduces something new, then they'll keep using it.
They'll buy it. Okay, so what we're gonna do, we're gonna do some closing thoughts from each of the panelists, and we're gonna keep those brief, right? And I'm gonna say a few words, a very few words, and then I'm gonna turn it over to the president, okay? So, let's start with, I'm gonna save you for last.
Save me for last. That's for last.
I'm gonna save you for last because I know you're gonna leave.
Yeah.
So, Kanisha, you start us off. Closing thoughts.
Closing thoughts. I would say, I think that now is one of the best times to branch out and do something for yourself with the technology that we have now. Like I said, it doesn't have to be an either or proposition. So last year I was running 3 businesses. So Beard Guy Box, Black Girl Magic, and then myself as an author as a 3rd business. You know, that would have been like unheard of a couple of years ago because I would have been stretching myself too thin. There are resources online like getting assistance through something like Fiverr or getting other contractors to help you in areas that you're weak at or that you don't want to spend time on. So I think now is the best time in our history to start something for yourself.
Yeah, I totally agree. I would say, again, can't stress that anymore. Believe in yourself. If you come up with an idea, go for it. You know, if you fall, you fail, get up, keep trying, and eventually it's going to come together. You're going to make it work. If you have children, teach your children to not just be a worker. Teach your children to be an owner.
They said everything, so.
You say it every time. And it's 20 minutes later.
It's so good. Okay, so I'm gonna tell you, confidence is the biggest thing. You know, I always want to say that don't be afraid to be confident. It's going to come across sometimes as being like you're too sure of yourself and all that, but that's even more reason why you should be confident in whatever it is that you're doing and really look at your plan, put it into actions, and the best way to do that is set your SMART goals, set tiny goals, do something every day toward that goal until you achieve it, and never give up, and always give yourself permission to move to the next level in your life.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So, starting it off one way, I'm going to end it pretty much the same way, with a little anecdote about each one of these ladies. So, for me, in life, I found that personal relationships are key, okay? So, throughout business, professional growth, throughout my personal life, personal connections relationships are important. I met Kenesha at the Black Sci-Fi Convention 2 years ago. I just walked by her booth. I liked her hair. And I loved the whole concept of what she was doing. And so I took a card, bought a book. Connected on Facebook, we're friends ever since. Okay? Sharon. I met Sharon having tapas in Rockville. And she told me a story about her 3 times grandmother. And from that point on, we've been cool. But what I learned about Sharon is the type of woman she is, the type of friend she is, as well as this spirit of, hey, she's always doing something. Every other month, hey, I got this idea. I'm gonna do this. I'm like, well, go ahead, go ahead on. But that's what I love about her. She says, what do you think about it? I says, it doesn't matter what I think about it. Go do it. And that's her. That's what I love about her. Miss Anne. I met her doing a FBLA, for business leaders of America, right? And children, the high schoolers, we're in the finals and we're judging, right? I just happened to stop and I introduced myself and talked to her for a moment, and the next thing I knew, we were just talking. Like, oh my God, I gotta go judge somebody. And so from that point on, I made it a point to stay connected with Anne. Okay? And that's why she's here. Miss Hollis. Okay. I was trying to reach this woman for almost a month. I had practically given up reaching her. The day I said, oh, Con, I don't know if we're going to be able to get her. That's the day she called me. And this is what's beautiful about this, okay? So you talk about your karma, you talk about how life is and how it's universal and everything comes around. This lady was so apologetic because she just realized, hey, I owe you an apology. I've been trying to read. I need to talk to you to let you know, hey, blah, blah, blah. Tell me what it is you need to tell me. We talked for about an hour and a half. And from that point on, I said, well, she'll be here. She's So thank you once again. And she stayed. She stayed all the way to the end.
I rearranged my schedule.
There you go. And so I had this idea about bringing this type of panel together for Black History Month, with everything we've been seeing with Me Too and everything else we've been experiencing over the last year, 2 years. I said, you know what would be nice? To have some strong women impart on how they've been able to accomplish the things in life. And so the whole panel was set up that way. So you've got what's going on now, and then you got the future right here, okay? So as a father of 3 daughters, I want to thank you all for attending, online, on Facebook, as well as here. And I'm going to turn it over to the president, and he's going to close us out.